Hello friends, Paper Historian here. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel, where we don't just tell stories, we drop you right into lives you would never survive. In today's video, we'll step into the world of the Amish in the 18th century, a place where your alarm clock is a rooster, your gym membership is a plough, your playlist is a 3-hour hymn with no melody, and your wardrobe is 50 shades of brown. Outsiders call it peaceful and simple. You, however, would call it suffocating. So settle in, dim the lights, and prepare yourself, because you wouldn't last a single day. You would like to think you could handle it, that waking up with the sun is just some romantic frontier challenge, like the sort of thing people in city apartments pay money to simulate on rustic retreats. But no, you could not. Because when the rooster screams in your ear and you realize there is no snooze button, no pillow over the head, no excuse about being not a morning person, there is only duty. And duty means you're on your feet before your body remembers it even has feet. The Amish world does not wait for you to stretch or groan. It does not care about your aching back, your unfinished dream, your craving for coffee that hasn't been invented in your community yet. It is dawn, and dawn is not a suggestion. It is a command. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a wooden frame, a mattress stuffed with straw that pokes through the thin linen, leaving scratches on your skin you will carry into the fields. There is no warmth except what you earned by piling quilts your mother stitched by hand. No stove waiting to click on, no furnace humming. The warmth comes from layers, from bodies huddled in the same room, from the wool socks that itch against your ankles. You don't roll out of bed, you wrench yourself free, knowing that hesitation only means more scolding. Clothing is simple, heavy, and relentless. There are no wardrobes with choices, no "what should I wear today" dilemmas. The question does not exist. For men, plain shirts, trousers held by suspenders, broad-brimmed hats that will soon be dripping with sweat. For women, long dresses, aprons, bonnets. Nothing tailored to comfort, nothing designed for style, just functionality and modesty. And you don't get to complain that the wool scratches, that the shoes are stiff, that the fabric never breathes. You tie it on because everyone else already has. And to be the one still fussing while the chores wait is shame enough to burn you hotter than the sun you're about to face. The morning meal is not coffee and eggs fried in butter with toast and jam, unless you count the kind made entirely by hands that woke before you. It is bread from yesterday's baking, perhaps milk, perhaps porridge if the harvest has been kind, perhaps apple butter if you are lucky. There is no sugar except what was boiled down last season, no exotic fruit, no indulgence. You eat quickly because eating is not a ritual of pleasure, but of fuel, and the faster you eat, the faster you can be pushed into the day's real business. Already by sunrise, chores have begun. Animals need feeding before you do. Cows must be milked while your fingers ache with the cold. Horses must be brushed and harnessed, chickens scattered with feed. You want to complain that it's too early, too heavy, too much, but there is no one to complain to, and if you did, the answer would be the same. This is life, and life doesn't care if you're tired. You don't negotiate with livestock. They demand, and you provide. The silence of the morning is not silence at all. It is the sound of shovels scraping, of buckets sloshing, of hooves stamping. The Amish do not allow music, not the kind you're used to. No fiddles or whistles or songs, except the slow, plain hymns saved for Sunday. The rhythm of your life is the clatter of tools, the creak of wood, the hiss of breath in cold air. You think you could hum a tune to keep your spirits up, but the moment you try, someone tells you to stop wasting air. You think coffee will save you, but there is no coffee here. Not in the 18th century Amish world. Coffee exists in Europe, but for you, a plain sect member in rural Pennsylvania, there is only milk or water. No caffeine, no warm mug to lean on, while pretending to wake up. Just cold reality and the work ahead. Already your hands are raw from the rope, your shoulders ache from lifting, your eyes sting from lack of rest. You've been awake for an hour and you already want the day to end, but for an Amish farmer, the day has only just begun, and it will stretch until the stars come out. By the time the sun is fully over the horizon, you have done more labor than a modern desk worker does in a week. You have shoveled, hauled, scraped, fed, watered, milked. Your body protests, but your body doesn't matter. Only the chores do. And when they are done, there will be more, because the Amish day is a series of chores stitched together until they form a life. And don't think you can sneak away, that maybe you'll sit in the corner and pretend to be sick. Illness is not an excuse unless it puts you in the ground. Cough? Work. Fever? Work. Headache? Pray while you work. Children work. Elders work. Men and women work. Everyone is bound to the same clock, the same endless sunrise to sunset machine of duty. You thought you wanted simplicity. You thought plain life meant peace. What it means is no escape, no diversions, no indulgence, no slack. The rooster crows, and your day belongs to the farm. You rise, you labor, you sweat. And if you think you could make it even a single morning without collapsing, you are already lying to yourself. Because the truth is this: one morning with the Amish in the 18th century would break you, not because you are weak, but because the very design of their world leaves no room for anyone who wishes to be anything but strong, silent, and endlessly obedient to the grind. You would like to believe clothing is a matter of choice, that waking up and deciding what to wear is some small freedom so trivial you barely notice it until it is taken away. Among the Amish in the 18th century, that choice does not exist. There is no wardrobe with colours, no mirrors full of questions about how you look, no moment of individuality peeking through fabric. The rules of dress are as strict as the rules of worship, and the punishment for disobedience is not just scolding, but exile, which, in this world, is worse than death. Because exile means losing the only community that feeds you, clothes you, shelters you. For men, the uniform is set before you can walk. A broad-brimmed hat, black or straw depending on the season, pulled low against sun or rain. A plain shirt, homespun linen, often stiff and rough against the skin. Trousers held up by suspenders, because belts are deemed worldly and unnecessary. No pockets stuffed with trinkets, no buttons too shiny, no collars meant to suggest vanity. Buttons themselves are suspect, too decorative, too proud, so hooks and eyes take their place, clumsy but humble. Shoes are leather, hard, built to endure, but never built for comfort. They blister and pinch until your feet toughen enough not to care. For women, the restrictions are tighter still. Bonnets hide their hair because hair itself is dangerous, too feminine, too alluring, too tempting for men who pretend their weakness is women's fault. Dresses are long, plain, stitched in the same muted colours, black, navy, brown, the shades of shadow and soil. Aprons are tied over them, not for fashion, but for function, because you will spend your life scrubbing, kneading, cooking, lifting. Sleeves are long, necklines high, everything designed to erase rather than reveal. Jewellery is forbidden. No earrings, no necklaces, no rings unless it is a wedding band, and even that is plain, a circle of metal that declares belonging, not love. And don't think this is just about modesty. It is about control. By making everyone look the same, the community crushes individuality before it can sprout. You cannot stand out. You cannot dress differently to express rebellion, to hint at personality, to whisper that you might be more than your chores. The plain clothes remind you every day that you are part of a whole, that your body is not yours, that your desires are not yours, that you belong first to God, then to the church, then to your family, in that order, always. The work of clothing never ends. Each dress, each shirt, each pair of trousers is made by hand. You do not wander into a shop, hand over coins, and walk out with fabric stitched by strangers. You sit at the loom, you spin thread, you weave, you cut, you stitch. Often by candlelight, your fingers raw, your eyes straining. A single dress can take weeks of work. A man's shirt is a day's worth of sewing, and you do it not once but endlessly, because clothes wear out, tear, stain. Laundry itself is an ordeal. Heavy tubs, boiling water, harsh lye soap that strips not only dirt but skin from your hands. You wash, you wring, you beat fabric against boards until your arms ache. And when it is dry, you iron it with heavy cast irons heated on stoves, lifting and pressing until your back screams. Your clothing is heavy, impractical, suffocating. In summer, the wool sticks to your skin, sweat soaking through until it feels like you are cooking inside your own body. In winter, it is never enough. Layers piled on layers, still not enough to keep the cold from biting through. But you wear it because you must, and you never complain, because complaining is a sin, and sins are punished harshly. Imagine yourself in that bonnet, day after day, hair hidden, scalp itching with sweat. Imagine wearing the same plain dress while your hands crack from lye soap, your apron stiff with flour or grease or mud. Imagine putting on the same trousers every morning, suspenders cutting into your shoulders, hat shading your eyes not from glamour but from endless labour. And then imagine never taking them off for pleasure, never changing into clothes that make you feel like yourself, because there is no self here. There is only the uniform, the plainness, the sameness. And the irony? This sameness is supposed to bring peace, to keep envy and vanity out of the community. But humans are humans. They notice anyway, whose apron is cleaner, whose bonnet is whiter, whose trousers are patched too many times. Judgment doesn't vanish, it just hides in subtler cracks. The difference is that here you cannot defend yourself by saying, "This is who I am," because who you are is swallowed by the fabric you wear. Would you last a week in this uniform, in this endless cycle of spinning, weaving, sewing, washing? Number. You would itch, you would sweat, you would curse under your breath until someone heard, and then you would be punished for daring to wish that clothes could be more than cages. And that is why you would fail. Because for the Amish of the 18th century, clothing was not just fabric, it was shackles disguised as virtue. You think you know what work is, because you once carried groceries up a flight of stairs or stayed late at the office, tapping keys on a machine that never makes your hands bleed. But you do not know work until you stand in a field at dawn with nothing but your own back, a horse that doesn't care whether you live or die, and an acre of soil that demands to be broken before the sun reaches its highest point. Among the Amish of the 18th century, labour is not an activity. It is existence, the air you breathe and the reason you wake. If you are a man, your day is carved out of the earth with sweat and blisters, and if you think you could survive it, you are lying to yourself. The field is not tidy, not forgiving. It stretches as far as your aching eyes can see, a patchwork of rye, corn and wheat that will feed your family if you coax it, and starve you if you falter. There are no tractors, no machines to roar and carry the burden. There is you, the plough, and the horse that must be guided like a stubborn god. The reins cut into your palms, the wooden plough shakes your bones, the soil resists with rocks and roots, and each furrow feels like carving a grave with your bare hands. By the second hour, your back is already screaming. Sweat runs down your spine in rivulets, soaking the plain shirt that felt too heavy even before the labour began. The sun climbs higher, and you remember with bitter clarity that there is no shade here, no pause, no modern illusion of break time. Breaks are sins against efficiency. You push on, because if you stop, the horse stops, and if the horse stops, the work halts, and halting is unacceptable. The farm will not forgive laziness. The community will not forgive laziness. God himself, as interpreted by the bishop, will not forgive laziness. The tools themselves are medieval by modern standards, and they are merciless. The axe for cutting trees, the scythe for mowing fields, the hoe for hacking weeds. Each one is heavy, unbalanced, designed not with ergonomics but with raw necessity. Your hands blister, then split, then bleed, but still you grip the handle because tools break less easily than men. And when tools do break, it is your duty to fix them. With wood you cut and iron you hammer because there is no blacksmith waiting on the corner. You are the blacksmith. You are the carpenter. You are every trade at once, whether you want to be or not. And what of the animals? They are both companions and tyrants. Horses pull the plough, but only if you bribe them with patience they do not deserve. Oxen lumber forward, like walls with legs, refusing to be hurried. Chickens peck at your ankles, cows moo until you milk them, pigs grunt until you slop them. Each creature requires care, each one devours time, each one punishes neglect. Miss a feeding and your animals weaken. Miss a milking and your cows sicken. Miss anything and you pay for it twice. Once in guilt, once in hunger. By midday, your body is already ruined. Your arms ache from swinging tools, your legs burn from trudging furrows, your lungs sting from breathing dust kicked up by hooves. You would give anything for a glass of water, but water is warm, pulled from the well, heavy to carry, and swallowed quickly before returning to the grind. You dream of coffee, but coffee does not exist for you. You dream of rest, but rest is for corpses. The irony is that the Amish call this peace. They reject the machines, the cities, the indulgence of modern life, and they say the farm keeps them close to God. Perhaps they are right. But for you, standing with your hands cracked and your back bent before you've even seen 30, it feels less like godliness and more like punishment disguised as virtue. There is no end until the sun falls. You work until your body can no longer lift, until the horse stumbles from exhaustion, until your vision blurs from heat. And then, finally, you stagger back, not to collapse, but to do it all again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until you die. Because men here do not retire. They do not rest. They work until their bodies fail, and then their sons pick up the tools, and the cycle continues, unbroken. Would you last? Number you would curse, you would falter, you would collapse in the furrows while the horse chewed grass indifferently. And the Amish would step over you because they have no patience for weakness. Work is survival, survival is faith, and faith does not pause to comfort you. This is why you would never make it. Because in the world of 18th century Amish men, life is not lived, it is laboured. You wake not to the rooster, but to the baby, because in an Amish household of the 18th century, your alarm clock has lungs and no mercy. Before the men even stumble into the yard to bridle the horses, you are already awake, already working, already tethered to duty. There is no such thing as rest, no moment that belongs only to you, no choice in how the morning begins. You are a woman, which means the house owns your hours and the house never sleeps. The kitchen is your battlefield, and the weapons are iron pots heavy enough to break your back and fires that smoke your lungs raw. You kneel to light the stove, coaxing sparks into flame with hands that are already cracked from lye soap, already scarred from burns of yesterday's meals. You grind corn by hand, pound butter until your arms throb, knead bread while the baby cries at your hip. Breakfast must be ready before men return from the barns, because their hunger takes priority, and you learn quickly that serving late is worse than serving poorly. Laundry is not a day's work, it is a lifetime sentence. You haul water from the well, bucket after bucket, until your shoulders scream. You heat it in iron pots over open flames, stir clothes with wooden paddles until steam blinds you. Lye soap strips your hands until the skin splits, and you keep scrubbing anyway, because children soil themselves, men ruin their shirts, and the house demands clean fabric to maintain the illusion of order. You wring and wring until your arms are noodles, then you hang clothes in the sun, praying it doesn't rain, because if it does, you start all over. Children are your constant shadow. They cling, they scream, they soil, they stumble. You carry one on your hip while stirring stew with the other hand, and when you put him down, another tugs at your skirts. Babies are born regularly because contraception is sin and marriage is duty, and every new child is another mouth to feed, another body to clothe, another burden on your already fractured spine. You nurse while cooking, scold while sweeping, sing hymns while your arms ache from cradling. Childhood, for them, is short. Work begins almost as soon as they can walk. But until then, they are yours, and their survival depends entirely on how much of yourself you are willing to spend keeping them alive. Preservation of food is endless. You churn butter, you salt meat, you pickle vegetables, you boil fruit into preserves, you dry corn, you stack root cellars with potatoes. Winter waits like a wolf, and every jar you seal is a bone thrown to keep it at bay. You cannot stop, because one bad harvest, one spoiled jar, one missed task can mean hunger gnawing at your children while snow piles at the door. Cleaning is constant. Dust, mud, soot. They return no matter how much you sweep. The floors demand scrubbing, the dishes demand scouring, the linens demand mending. Your hands are raw, your back bent, your knees permanently sore from kneeling. There is no glory, no recognition, no pause. Only the endless cycle of dirt and effort, until you begin to wonder if you are cleaning the house or if the house is consuming you. And then there are the rules. You may not adorn yourself. No jewelry, no lace, no vanity. Your beauty belongs to no one, least of all yourself. Your bonnet hides your hair, your plain dress erases your figure. You cook, you clean, you nurse, you obey. Men labor in the fields and speak of faith. Women labor in the house and embody submission. You do not vote in community meetings. You do not speak in church unless permitted. You do not question authority. Silence is your second skin, as heavy as your apron. You think perhaps Sunday brings respite. It does not. Sunday means church, which means rising even earlier to prepare food for after, washing children until their skin is raw, ironing clothes until your arms ache. You sit through sermons that last hours, wooden benches beneath you, children fidgeting beside you, hymns sung slowly, voices droning without harmony. You bow your head, not out of peace, but out of exhaustion. Illness brings no reprieve. If you are sick, you still cook. If you are fevered, you still clean. If you are coughing blood, you still haul water, because the work does not vanish and no one else will do it. You push your body until it collapses, and even then, the community praises your endurance rather than mourns your suffering. Pain is not reason to stop. It is proof that you are fulfilling your duty. You are told this is a life of simplicity, of peace, of closeness to God. And perhaps, in the eyes of the bishop, it is. But for you, bending over an iron pot, sweating into the soup, scolding children while your spine creaks, simplicity feels less like virtue and more like a sentence handed down for the crime of being born female. Would you last a week? Number your hands would blister, your lungs would fill with smoke, your patience would snap under the constant cries of children. Your body would fold beneath the endless hauling of water. You would curse, you would scream, you would collapse. And the Amish would look at you with pity, perhaps with contempt, and tell you that you simply were not strong enough, not faithful enough, not obedient enough. And they would be right, at least in one sense. You are not built for this. Because in the 18th century Amish world, women are not allowed to be anything but vessels of labor, and you would never survive a day when every hour demands your body, your voice, your silence, your soul. You arrive thinking religion is private, some quiet thing between a person and their God, maybe an hour on Sunday morning followed by a potluck and laughter in the yard. But you are wrong, because here in the 18th century Amish world, faith is not a matter of the soul, it is the marrow in your bones, the weight in your breath, the chain around your neck, and you do not remove it because you cannot. It is the air you breathe, and to stop breathing is to die. The Ordnung, the sacred, unwritten rulebook, governs everything. Not everything in the sense of a few commandments, but everything in the sense that even the way you hold a spoon, the way you part your hair, the way you sing, the way you walk, the very posture of your body is dictated, and deviation, however small, is not eccentricity, but sin. You might imagine that rules this dense would be written down, codified, explained. They are not. They are spoken, remembered, whispered from elder to parent to child, fluid in detail, but iron in effect, and you spend your life terrified of breaking rules that you cannot see, but that everyone else seems to know instinctively. Start with Sunday. You are told this is the Lord's day, a day of rest, but rest is not peace. Rest is 3 or 4 hours of hymns sung so slowly, you forget where one note ends and the next begins, verses that drag like winter nights, your voice cracking while you sit on a hard bench in someone's farmhouse, because churches are too proud, too worldly, so services happen in homes. You sit pressed between neighbours, your back screaming, children squirming, the air thick with sweat and candle smoke, while the bishop preaches. Guys, he does not preach for 20 minutes. He preaches for hours, weaving warnings about pride, vanity, sin, pride again, and the dangers of straying from the ordnung. Your legs go numb, your mind drifts, but there is no escape. If you so much as shift too loudly, eyes turn on you, and you remember, this is not worship to comfort, it is worship to discipline. The hymns themselves are a form of punishment disguised as devotion. They are ancient, in German so old even your grandparents do not understand all the words. They are slow, deliberately so, voices droning in unison, no harmony, no instruments, because instruments are vanity, and vanity is sin. The slowness is intentional. It breaks your body, it breaks your mind, it teaches you patience by bleeding it out of you. You want to sing quickly, joyfully, to feel uplifted. Instead, you feel nailed to the bench by monotony. And that is the point. Joy is dangerous, but submission is holy. Every detail of life is regulated. Your clothing must be plain, navy, black, brown, nothing that shines, nothing that flatters. Buttons are forbidden because they are fancy, so you fumble with hooks and eyes while outsiders laugh at your clumsiness. Shoes must be leather, unadorned, practical. Women cover their hair with bonnets because hair might tempt, and temptation is your fault. Men grow beards only after marriage, and even then only beards, never moustaches, because soldiers wear moustaches, and soldiers are worldly. Your very face is a proclamation of obedience. Your house follows rules too. Curtains may not be too bright. Walls may not be decorated with images, because images are pride. Furniture is functional, not stylish. Every plank, every nail, every window pane is judged by its humility. You think you own your home. You don't. The ordnung owns it. Tools, even, are suspect. A metal rake is fine. A shiny new invention is not. The community debates endlessly over what is permitted and what is not, and the answer is always the same. Whatever keeps you humble, whatever keeps you separate from the English, the outsiders. If it makes life easier, it is worldly. If it makes life harder, it is holy. And so you work with outdated plows, with lamps instead of lanterns, with hands instead of machines. Not because it is efficient, but because suffering is virtue. And always there is the threat of shunning. You do not need to steal, or murder, or blaspheme to be shunned. You need only stray, wear something too bright, talk too long with outsiders, question a sermon, sing a tune that is not in the hymnal. Shunning, Meidung, means no one will speak to you, no one will eat with you, no one will sell to you, no one will acknowledge you exist. Your parents, your siblings, your children will look past you as though you were a ghost. In a world where survival depends entirely on community, this is not a punishment. It is annihilation in slow motion. Even in your home, you are never alone. Your family polices you, your neighbours police you, the elders police everyone. Gossip is surveillance. A careless word at the well can travel faster than a horse, arriving at the bishop's ears before you reach your door. And then the questions come. Why were you laughing so loudly? Why were you seen standing too close to that outsider? Why is your bonnet not tied tightly enough? You defend yourself, but it doesn't matter. The accusation is enough. You bow your head, apologize, accept correction, because defiance would mean exclusion. You think maybe marriage will bring freedom, that choosing a partner is at least your right. It is not. Courtship is observed, monitored, sanctioned. You do not flirt, you do not touch, you do not decide without permission. Even within marriage, intimacy is not pleasure but duty, children not joy but obligation. You do not decide how many. You have as many as God sends, because to limit birth is vanity, and vanity is sin. Your womb belongs not to you but to God and the Ordnung. The absence of joy is palpable. There are no dances, no fiddles, no music beyond hymns. No novels, no plays, no paintings. You think you might sneak a book, a song, a drawing, but even if you did, guilt would consume you. They've trained you so well that even rebellion tastes like sin before anyone else notices. And the hypocrisy cuts like a blade. You are told this Ordnung is freedom, from vanity, from pride, from the chaos of the outside world. But you do not feel free. You feel crushed, suffocated, erased. Freedom here means the freedom to conform, the freedom to obey, the freedom to silence the part of yourself that longs for more. Could you survive it? A day, maybe. A week, unlikely. A year, impossible. You are too used to laughter without guilt, to songs with melody, to colour that doesn't have to apologise for existing. You would chafe under the weight of their silence, their suspicion, their endless rules. You would breathe shallowly, your chest tight, your mind screaming for escape. And in time, they would notice. They always notice. And you would face the choice. Obey until you vanish, or resist and be erased. That is why you would fail. Because here, religion is not faith. It is surveillance, discipline, conformity. It is the sermon that never ends, the hymn that never lifts, the rule book that suffocates even though it isn't written. And you, who believe faith can be private, who think God might love without punishing, would not last. You imagine that somewhere, somehow, in a life this strict, there must be a place for fun, that even the harshest Ordnung would allow a little breathing room. But you are wrong. Because entertainment among the Amish of the 18th century is not about joy, it is about control, disguised as community. And if you thought you could survive without music, without games, without books, without any outlet but labour, you are already broken before the first hymn begins. Start with the obvious: no instruments, violins, fiddles, flutes, worldly temptations, all of them. Music is not forbidden entirely, but melody is. Only the Ausbund, the ancient hymnal sung in a German older than your grandparents, is permitted. The songs drone on without harmony, without rhythm, without joy. They stretch for minutes, for hours, until your throat burns and your mind wanders. Outsiders might call it worship, you would call it suffocation. You crave a tune, a beat, something to lift your spirits, but instead you are trapped in a room full of voices that blend into monotone, a wall of sound designed not to inspire, but to discipline. Books? Forget it. Outside of the Bible and a few devotional texts, reading is vanity. Novels are sin, poetry is pride, plays are corruptions of the outside world. There is no Shakespeare, no fairy tales, no stories, but the ones whispered in sermons and reinforced by elders. Children grow up without imagination, except for what the land forces on them. Fields, barns, chores. You think you could sneak a book into your apron pocket, read by candlelight under the quilt. But the fear of discovery is worse than the hunger for words. Better to remain illiterate than risk exile. Games. Only those that teach work or patience. No dice, no cards, no gambling. Luck is sinful, chance is ungodly. Children might play tag in the yard, might carve toys from scraps of wood, but nothing too lively, nothing too joyous, nothing that might spark rebellion. For adults, recreation is a frolic, but do not let the word fool you. A frolic is not a party. It is a communal workday disguised as festivity. The barn needs raising, the field needs clearing, the quilt needs stitching. Neighbours gather, they labour together, and afterward they share food and maybe a hymn. You leave not lighter, but heavier, stuffed with starch and exhaustion. Outsiders might mistake this for merriment. You know better. It is duty in celebratory wrapping. Courtship offers no reprieve. You imagine young people flirting, sneaking glances, whispering in corners. But here, even love is policed. Couples are watched, their interactions monitored. Any spark of passion is extinguished by rules and suspicion. Weddings are not occasions of wild celebration, but solemn rituals of obedience. The bride in plain dress, the groom in plain coat, both of them already looking like the elders who enforce the Ordnung. The feast is hearty, but joyless, a reminder that even marriage is not about love, but about continuation, about duty, about filling the pews with more children who will sing the same endless hymns. What about holidays? Surely Christmas, Easter, harvest festivals must provide joy. Again, you are wrong. Christmas brings hymns and sermons. Easter brings more hymns and sermons. Harvest brings thanksgiving prayers and endless work to preserve food. There are no decorations, no bright lights, no colours splashed across the house. There is plainness, always the same dull palette of navy and brown. If you long for a Christmas tree, for candles twinkling, for a feast with laughter, you are longing for the outside world, and longing itself is sin. The only break, the only so-called entertainment, is conversation at gatherings. Families sit, neighbours talk, elders drone. Gossip exists, of course it does. But even gossip is dangerous. Say the wrong thing, laugh too loudly, hint at rebellion, and the wrong ears will hear. Words here are currency, and you spend them carefully. You might think that children would rebel, and some do, though in the 18th century there is no formal Rumspringa, no structured rebellion like later centuries would allow. If a child strays too far, the elders intervene. Discipline is harsh, shame sharper. You cannot run to the city. You do not even know what the city truly is. You are tethered to the farm, to the Ordnung, to the judgment of neighbours. Escape is a fantasy, not an option. So you sit in the evenings with your family, the candles sputtering, the air heavy with fatigue. Men discuss the weather, the crops, the price of tools. Women sew, mend, prepare for the next day's work. Children fidget until they are hushed. No songs, no laughter, no stories except scripture. You think you could endure it? That silence is peace. But the silence here is not peace. It is pressure, constant suffocating. Would you survive this? You would go mad within days. You would hum a tune, tap your foot, reach for a book, crack a joke, laugh too loudly. And when you did, the eyes would turn on you. The silence would deepen, and you would realize that joy itself is forbidden. Because here, in the Amish world of the 18th century, entertainment does not exist. And if you think you can live without it, you are lying to yourself. You imagine that adolescence is rebellion, that becoming a teenager means rolling your eyes at parents, sneaking out after dark, whispering secrets, dreaming of running away. But with the Amish of the 18th century, rebellion is not an option, because it has been strangled out of you long before you ever reach the age to imagine it. By the time you are 14, your spine already knows the weight of the Ordnung. Your back already knows the weight of a plough. Your hands already know the cracks from lye soap. You have no time to roll your eyes, because your eyes are busy watching for weeds in the cornrows, watching for laundry boiling over, watching for elders who measure every gesture against an invisible code. If you are a boy, adolescence means strength without freedom. Your body grows taller, heavier, and immediately the farm claims it. You are expected to take the plough as your father did, to swing the axe until your shoulders burn, to work dawn to dusk without complaint. There is no space for poetry, no room for wandering thoughts. If you speak of anything but soil and scripture, suspicion creeps in. Your future is already assigned. More land to till, more children to raise, more hours to give to sermons. You imagine cities, perhaps, because you have heard whispers from outsiders, but imagination itself feels dangerous. You smother it quickly, because dreaming is rebellion, and rebellion here is a sin against God and family alike. If you are a girl, adolescence means labor without voice. Your body changes, and with it come more chores, more expectation, more eyes watching for modesty. Your hips widen. That means more children you will bear. Your hands grow steadier. That means more sewing, more kneading, more nursing. You are not asked what you want. You are asked if the bread has risen, if the stew is salted, if the baby is quiet. Courtship looms, but it is not romance, not fluttering hearts. It is a transaction, whispered among parents, sanctioned by bishops, wrapped in plain dresses and sermons. You do not blush. You bow. Adolescence in this world is not discovery, it is indoctrination. From the time you are 10, you are seated in the benches during endless church services, absorbing the drone of hymns until you can recite them in your sleep. From the time you are 12, you are drilled in obedience. Do not laugh too loudly, do not walk too fast, do not look outsiders in the eye. By 14, you are already half an adult in responsibility, fully an adult in labor, and still a child in freedom. Education is minimal. Reading, writing, enough arithmetic to measure crops or count jars of preserved food. Anything more is vanity. Knowledge is dangerous, curiosity is rebellion. You will never know Shakespeare, Galileo, or Descartes. You will never read novels or newspapers. The world beyond your valley may as well be another planet, and if you dare to ask about it, the elders remind you that it is corrupt, sinful, damned. And because you have nothing to compare, you believe them, or at least pretend to. What of love? What of that brief flame teenagers are supposed to feel, the thrill of stolen glances, the laughter of discovery? It exists, of course, but it is smothered. Courtship is chaperoned, conversations limited, touches forbidden. You might sit beside someone after church, walk a short way together, exchange words so careful they sound like scripture. To outsiders, it looks quaint. To you, it feels suffocating because you know that every word is monitored, every movement weighed. The choice of partner is not truly yours. It belongs to the Ordnung, to your family, to the church. Your heart is not consulted. Your duty is. And if, impossibly, you do rebel, if you sneak a smile at an outsider, if you linger too long in forbidden company, the punishment is swift. You are shamed, lectured, disciplined. The threat of shunning hangs like a storm cloud. To be shunned as a teenager is to be erased before your life has begun. Your parents would eat without you, your siblings would avert their eyes, your neighbors would treat you as dead. You do not risk it. You swallow your rebellion like bitter medicine. The irony is that outsiders romanticize Amish youth. They imagine innocence, purity, a simple life uncorrupted by modern excess. They do not see the weight of silence, the crushing of individuality, the suffocation of any spark that might make a person unique. You are not innocent, you are muted, and innocence feels less like a gift than like theft. Would you survive this? Number. By the time you were 15, you would already be planning your escape. But in the 18th century, escape was nearly impossible. There were no cities waiting to welcome you, no jobs you could slip into, no railroads to carry you away. The outside world spoke a different language, literally and spiritually. You would be alone, penniless, friendless, and damned in the eyes of your people. To run was to die. To stay was to suffocate. Those were your only choices. And so you stayed. You bowed your head, you sang the hymns, you swallowed your questions. You grew into the mold they cast for you, not because you wanted to, but because the weight of community crushed rebellion before it could bloom. Adolescence ended not with discovery, but with surrender. And that, more than anything, is why you would not make it here, because you cannot imagine being young without freedom. But the Amish of the 18th century could not imagine being young with it. You imagine that old age is a kind of reward, that after decades of labour there must come a season of rest, a chair by the fire, a chance to pass on stories while children gather at your feet. But among the Amish of the 18th century, you quickly learn there is no such thing as rest, no such thing as reward, no soft landing waiting for bodies worn to dust. Old age here is not peace, but persistence. You live as long as your body can endure, and when it finally fails, you are buried in the same plain earth you have spent your entire life breaking apart with a plough. If you are a man, your back has long since bent under the weight of harnesses, your hands are knotted like the roots you've ripped from the soil, your knees creak with every step. But still you rise at dawn, because the animals do not care about your age, the soil does not care about your bones, and the Ordnung does not care about your pain. You may not plough an acre anymore, but you feed the chickens, you mend the fences, you sharpen tools for sons and grandsons who will one day look just like you. You keep working because to stop is to admit weakness, and weakness is a sin. Retirement is a word you will never learn. If you are a woman, your body is a battlefield of childbirth survived and not survived, your hips wide, your spine crooked, your hands scarred from decades of soap, fire, and endless stitching. You rise not to care for babies of your own, but for the babies of your daughters, because women's work does not vanish. It only multiplies. You knead bread with aching arms, sew quilts with eyes too dim to thread needles, rock infants with shoulders that can no longer carry weight. And when you collapse in silence, because complaining is vanity, and vanity is sin. The elders are praised, of course, but not with ease. You are respected for your endurance, not cared for because of your fragility. Your grey hair earns you no indulgence. Instead, it marks you as a reminder of what awaits the young, a lifetime of obedience, followed by more obedience, followed by death. You sit in the benches at church longer than anyone else, the hymns slower than ever, the sermons droning until you feel your spirit float away. And when your eyes close in exhaustion, someone nudges you awake, because even in old age, sleep is indulgence. Your body fails before your duty does. Arthritis makes it impossible to grip tools, cataracts blur the world, hearing fades until hymns become muffled groans. But still, you are expected to bow your head, to nod in rhythm, to show by your presence that obedience never ends. You do not get to drift into eccentricity, to be forgiven for quirks. If you stray from the Ordnung even in old age, you risk shunning. Imagine 60 years of obedience, and still a wrong step could condemn you to silence, your family refusing to speak, your children refusing to eat with you. You would rather die than risk it. And so you obey until the last breath. There are no rocking chairs here, no novels read by firelight, no songs hummed in nostalgia. There is plainness, always plainness. Your stories, if you tell them, are the same sermons you've heard your whole life. Warnings against pride, examples of humility, reminders of duty. Your grandchildren listen politely, then return to chores. There is no space for once upon a time. There is only thus it shall be. Death itself is plain too. No headstones carved with poetry, no flowers, no colours. A wooden coffin, a hole in the ground, a hymn sung so slowly you wonder if the dead grow restless, waiting for it to end. Your name is recorded, perhaps, but your individuality is not. You are remembered only as part of the community, one more piece in the endless pattern of obedience. You lived plain, you died plain, and the earth takes you back as quietly as you lived. Would you last to this point? Would you endure decades of labour only to arrive at an end that feels less like reward and more like anticlimax? Probably not. You would crave recognition, softness, comfort. You would want your life to mean something beyond work and obedience. But here, among the Amish of the 18th century, meaning is measured not in joy, but in discipline. And discipline is endless until it is not. The cruelest irony is this: outsiders romanticize Amish old age. They imagine gentle elders in plain clothes, sitting on porches, rocking chairs creaking, children gathered around. They see wisdom in simplicity, peace in discipline. They do not see the arthritis, the cataracts, the bent backs, the lives that never allowed rest. They do not see that old age here is not a separate stage of life, but simply more of the same, only with less strength and more pain. They call it peaceful. You would call it exhaustion. And so the cycle continues. Children grow, become workers, become parents, become elders, become corpses. The Ordnung persists, the community survives, and the individual, always the individual, is erased. That is the legacy of Amish old age in the 18th century: survival without freedom, discipline without end, death without release. Would you survive to see it? Perhaps, if your body didn't break first, if your spirit didn't rebel first, if your silence didn't choke you first. But would you want to? That is another question entirely. You think you understand now, after all these pieces, but the truth is you only have fragments, dawns that claw you out of sleep, fields that grind your spine into crooked permanence, kitchens that cook your lungs with smoke, sermons that flatten your spirit until it can no longer remember what joy felt like, clothes that erase your body, rules that erase your mind. Put them together, and you realize the Amish world of the 18th century is not a life, but a loop, a wheel that turns endlessly, crushing individuality beneath it, grinding out generation after generation who look, dress, pray, work, and die exactly the same. And you, raised on the idea that choice is a birthright, that freedom is default, that rest and pleasure are not crimes, would last less than a day. The loop begins at birth. A child arrives and immediately the Ordnung claims them. They are wrapped not only in cloth, but in rules. No vanity, no pride, no curiosity. They are taught to bow their heads before they know how to stand. By the time they can walk, they are already working, feeding chickens, hauling wood, carrying water. School is minimal, a handful of years at most, enough to read scripture, enough to count jars in a cellar, nothing more. Knowledge beyond that is danger, and danger is sin. Adolescence does not open doors, it closes them. You do not discover yourself, you are told what you are. A boy is a farmer, a girl is a wife and mother. The end. Courtship is regulated, marriage is approved, choices narrowed until they vanish. You belong to the community before you belong to yourself. And if you think otherwise, you are corrected, gently if you are lucky, with silence if you are not. Adulthood is labor. Men bend in fields from dawn to dusk, their hands cracked, their backs ruined. Women bend over fires, cradles, tubs, their hands raw, their lungs filled with smoke, their wombs bearing child after child. Breaks do not exist. Leisure is suspicion. Fun is sin. Entertainment means work in groups, frolics that outsiders romanticize, but you know are just barn raisings with extra pie. Joy is rationed, laughter policed, individuality erased. Religion is not comfort, it is the cage itself. The Ordnung dictates every detail, the color of your dress, the angle of your hat, the absence of buttons, the absence of song, the absence of life beyond what the elders decree. You sit through sermons that last hours, hymns so slow you forget the beginning before you reach the end. You are told this is freedom, freedom from pride, freedom from the chaos of the outside world. But it feels like suffocation disguised as piety. The only real freedom is the freedom to conform, and conformity is endless. And then comes old age if you reach it. Your body breaks long before your duty does. Men work until they collapse. Women bear children until they cannot. The community praises endurance, not peace. You are not cared for because you are weak. You are respected because you suffer. Retirement is fantasy. Rest is indulgence. You keep working, keep bowing, keep singing until your body refuses. And then you're buried in plain wood beneath plain earth. Your name remembered only as part of the group, never as yourself. This is the circle. Birth into rules, childhood into work, adolescence into silence, adulthood into labor, old age into exhaustion, death into erasure. And then it repeats with your children, and theirs, each generation convinced that this is peace, that this is obedience, that this is God's will. Perhaps for them it is, but for you, who are used to colour, to song, to freedom of thought and movement, it would be unbearable. The irony is that outsiders romanticize it. They write of Amish simplicity, Amish harmony, Amish devotion. They see plain clothes and call them purity. They see horse-drawn ploughs and call it peace. They see lack of technology and call it wisdom. They do not see the cracked hands, the bent spines, the suffocated laughter, the children who never knew imagination, the elders who never knew rest. They confuse absence with virtue, discipline with joy. Could you survive it? Perhaps for a morning. You could rise with the rooster once, hitch the horse once, sing one endless hymn. Perhaps for a day. You could wear the heavy clothes, eat the plain food, sit through the sermon. But by the second day, you would crack. You would hum a tune not in the hymnal. You would wish for a book. You would crave colour, laughter, choice. And when you did, the eyes of the community would turn on you, and you would feel the weight of judgment so heavy it would crush your spirit. And that is the truth. The Amish life of the 18th century is survivable only if you are born into it, shaped by it, broken by it early enough that you never dream of escape. If you arrive from the outside with even the faintest memory of freedom, you would suffocate in hours, not because you are weak, but because the system is designed to leave no air for individuality. You would not last, not a week, not a day, not even an hour, without longing for something forbidden. And in that longing, the Ordnung would already declare you guilty. So when people speak of the Amish life as peaceful, as idyllic, as closer to God, remember this. Peace built on silence is not peace, it is suffocation. Simplicity enforced by fear is not simplicity, it is deprivation. And harmony achieved by erasing every note that does not fit is not harmony, it is control. That is why you would never survive. Because in the 18th century Amish world, life itself was not lived, it was endured. Moving on to the next story, we'll examine the most unbelievable medieval torture methods. You think justice is about fairness, scales in balance, blindfolds that guarantee impartiality. But in the Middle Ages, justice was never blind. It stared directly at you with bloodshot eyes and hands already reaching for the rope, the fire, the rack. To be accused was not to be measured against evidence or witnesses, but to be handed over to ritual, a grotesque performance where your body became the stage, your screams the chorus, and the verdict already written before you stepped onto the platform. Torture existed not to find truth, but to display it, to make truth visible through pain, because people believed that if the flesh cracked, the soul would spill its secrets. And if you think you would have argued your innocence, you are already doomed. Argument means nothing. Your protestations of "I did not steal," or "I did not consort with demons," or "I am loyal," are whispers drowned in the creak of the wheel being prepared. In their world, truth is not in words, but in endurance. They tell themselves that God would not let an innocent man break under torment, that only the guilty confess. But you already know the flaw. Everybody breaks. The rack does not care about innocence. Fire does not spare the righteous. The only guarantee is that pain will produce a confession, and once the confession comes, the system congratulates itself for finding the truth. It was not born from ignorance alone. It was born from inheritance. The Romans used torture to question slaves, assuming their words worthless until beaten into honesty. Medieval Europe copied that cruelty, sanctified it with scripture, and built an entire legal theatre around it. The Inquisition perfected it. Confession under agony was not only accepted but encouraged, because pain, they said, drove the devil out and left only pure testimony. In reality, it left only whatever words would stop the agony, but the inquisitors did not care. The ledger showed confession, the crowd saw a broken heretic, and the machine moved on to its next victim. Imagine a town square. The sun is low, the air heavy with sweat and manure. A thief is dragged forward, accused of stealing bread. Does anyone truly care if he did it? Number. The point is to make an example. The magistrate reads the charges with the pomp of a priest reciting scripture. The executioner stands nearby, masked or barefaced, holding tools polished from use. The crowd presses closer. Children climb onto barrels to see better. The man is strapped down, his limbs tightened until he cannot move, and the first crack of the whip silences everything but his scream. The lesson is clear. Not that justice has been done, but that power has been displayed, and the church is there, not hiding in shame, but blessing the spectacle. Priests mutter prayers while men are burned alive, telling the crowd that these flames are cleansing, that this agony is salvation. To confess under torture is not only to give evidence, but to cleanse your soul before death. Your screams are not cruelty, they insist, but exorcism, and the people believe it. They leave the square whispering that justice was served, that God's will was done, when in truth all that happened was a man bled while the system proved its own righteousness through violence. It was theatre, every part of it. The dungeon where prisoners were chained was not merely for storage, but for atmosphere. The instruments, racks, thumbscrews, iron boots, strappado, were displayed like props before use. Even the language was ritualistic. The judge would ask if the accused wished to confess voluntarily, and when the accused refused, they would be assisted by pain. Voluntary became involuntary. Truth became a scream. Guilt became inevitable. You imagine yourself clever enough to resist, perhaps even stoic enough to endure. But you would not. Few did. The rack stretched joints until they tore. The strappado dislocated shoulders until arms hung useless. The iron boots crushed bone until legs became pulp. Every nerve in your body would light up, every thought reduced to survival, and survival meant saying whatever they wanted. You would scream that you worshipped the devil, that you plotted against the king, that you poisoned the well, even if you never saw poison in your life. And they would nod, record it, call it evidence. Torture was also entertainment. The crowd did not gather simply to see justice. They gathered because pain was spectacle. A wheel breaking bones one by one, a body twisting unnaturally, a witch submerged in water while neighbours debated whether she floated or sank. These were not quiet affairs. They were festivals of fear. Vendors sold bread while you screamed. Children laughed or cried. Men drank. The performance reinforced order. If you obeyed, you were safe in the crowd. If you disobeyed, you were the one on the stage. Everyone learned their lines. And there were rules, at least on parchment. Torture could only be applied once, technically, but magistrates circumvented it with loopholes. One session could last hours, days, as long as the victim did not technically leave the chamber. Some declared new evidence and restarted the process. Some simply ignored the restriction. The rules existed to soothe conscience, not to protect flesh. Who ordered it? Not monsters hiding in shadows, but respectable men. Judges, bishops, aldermen, pillars of the community. They believed, or pretended to believe, that pain revealed truth, that confession under agony was valid. But they also knew the other truth. Fear works. Fear keeps peasants from stealing, keeps heretics from speaking, keeps dissenters quiet. Torture was cheaper than armies, faster than debate, more convincing than sermons. Picture yourself again, accused not of crime, but of gossip. You questioned a relic, perhaps, or muttered that the priest grows fat while the poor starve. Someone heard, someone repeated. Suddenly, you are dragged before a magistrate. You protest your innocence. He nods gravely, says, "God will show the truth," and orders you to the chamber. You are strapped, hoisted, stretched. The pain is instant, sharp, unimaginable. You hold out for minutes, maybe hours, but eventually you break. You confess, though you did nothing. And the next day, you are paraded before the town as proof that lies and heresy are punished. The system congratulates itself. The people feel safe. And you disappear into history as another body consumed by the machine. That was the purpose. Not truth, not fairness, control. The spectacle of pain told everyone else what words never could. Obey, or this is you. Would you survive it? Number, you would scream, you would confess, you would beg for mercy that would never come. And the crowd would nod, whisper, tell themselves they had seen justice. But justice here was never about truth. It was about power, and pain was the language it spoke. You might think torture was reserved for the great villains of history, traitors plotting to stab kings in their sleep, assassins caught with daggers, conspirators whispering in dark corners. But the truth, and it is a bitter truth, is that the medieval world did not need villains. It created them out of anyone inconvenient. And once the accusation was made, you were already half guilty, because the process was not about whether you did it, but about whether your body could be bent to prove what they already believed. Start with witches, because they are the most infamous. A woman who lived alone, who brewed herbs, who knew how to ease childbirth or cure a fever, could be accused of sorcery. Did her neighbor's cow die? Was a child stillborn? Did the weather turn sour? Surely she caused it, whispered with demons, danced in the forest with Satan himself. The accusation needed no evidence. Suspicion was enough. And once suspicion existed, torture followed, because witches confessed. Everyone confessed. Once the rack pulled their joints out of their sockets. They confessed to flying through the night, to kissing the devil, to poisoning wells. They named names, dragging more women, sometimes men, into the circle. And the system congratulated itself. See, the devil is everywhere, and the proof is in her broken screams. Heretics were next in line. To doubt the church, to mutter that bread did not literally become flesh at the altar, to refuse to pay tithes, to read scripture in the wrong tongue. These were not disagreements, they were treason against heaven. And treason required punishment, not just of the mind, but of the body. Heretics were stretched, burned, crushed, not simply to silence them, but to show the crowd that ideas themselves could be beaten into submission. You think you could have whispered doubt safely? Number one wrong word in the wrong ear, and you would be hoisted by your wrists, shoulders dislocating, while priests asked if you still doubted. Most recanted, some endured, all broke eventually. And the church held up their confessions as proof that God's truth was victorious, when really it was just pain doing its work. But torture was not reserved for lofty sins. Thieves, beggars, debtors, all could find themselves under the lash. Steal a loaf of bread because your children were starving. You might be whipped until your back was raw, branded with iron so every eye knew your shame, or even have a hand crushed or chopped away. Owe money to the wrong noble. You might be racked until your family paid, or until you admitted to theft you never committed. Justice was transactional. The poor paid in flesh what they could not pay in coin. And the irony, nobles were not immune either. Treason, conspiracy, rebellion. If you were caught, you were tortured too, though with more ceremony. They might stretch you on a wheel, not in a dungeon, but in public, as an example that even blue blood ran red under pressure. The message was clear. Power protects you until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it destroys you spectacularly. Ordinary peasants were the most common fodder. A rumour, a feud, a neighbour's jealousy. Any of it could end with you tied to a post. Medieval communities thrived on gossip, and gossip became accusation, and accusation became torment. Did your cow wander into another's field? Did you harvest wood from the wrong forest? Did you refuse to bow low enough at mass? All of these could become pretexts for punishment. You, the anonymous villager, were the perfect victim. No allies, no wealth, no power. Your body was cheap currency, and the system spent it freely. Foreigners suffered too. Outsiders, traders passing through, strangers with strange accents, Jews living on the margins of towns, were easy scapegoats. If the well was poisoned, if plague arrived, if crops failed, suspicion fell on them. And suspicion was enough. They were tortured until they confessed to crimes no one could commit, because someone had to pay, and pain always paid. And don't forget the soldiers, prisoners of war. Captured enemies were interrogated not with questions, but with flames, wheels, knives. Their bodies became maps from which generals hoped to read strategies. Did they learn anything useful? Rarely. But the screams satisfied the need for vengeance, and vengeance, like truth, was considered a worthy outcome. You imagine yourself safe because you are ordinary, because you keep your head down. But ordinary is the most dangerous thing to be. Ordinary means vulnerable, replaceable, voiceless. You could be accused of witchcraft, heresy, theft, debt, or simply bad luck. And once accused, you were already guilty because torture would force the confession, and the confession would prove the guilt, and the circle closed around you like the rope around your wrists. This was the brilliance, if brilliance is the word, of medieval torture. It did not require evidence, only victims. And victims were everywhere. Women, men, rich, poor, strangers, neighbors. Anyone could be fed into the machine. The crowd needed to be entertained. The church needed to be obeyed. The nobles needed to be feared. And so the wheel kept turning, grinding innocence into guilt, flesh into example, life into spectacle. Would you have escaped? Number, your only hope would be invisibility, silence, obedience so complete it erases you. And even then, all it takes is one whisper, one rumor, one unlucky day, and you are no longer invisible. You are strapped to the rack, your body twisting into the shape of a confession. That is who suffered, not monsters, not villains, just people. People like you. You would like to believe that torture always meant fire and racks and shattered bones, that if you stayed quiet enough, obedient enough, the worst you might face would be a fine or a night in a cell. But medieval justice did not work like that. It thrived on a spectrum, beginning with punishments so mild they were considered merciful, yet so humiliating and painful you would have begged for them to end. And in truth, these mild punishments were not merciful at all. They were rehearsals, warm-ups, ways of softening you before the harder cruelties were applied. Start with the stocks and pillories, because they were the most visible and the most theatrical. You are dragged into the town square, your hands, head or feet clamped into wooden frames, your body bent in awkward angles. There you remain for hours, sometimes days, not bleeding yet, but enduring something perhaps worse. The stares and laughter of your neighbours. Children throw mud. Merchants spit on you as they pass. Someone hurls rotten vegetables, a chicken carcass, dung. You smell of filth and shame, trapped in a device that makes you less a person and more a display. The point is not to injure you, not at first, but to erase your dignity publicly, to reduce you to a warning others can walk past. Behold, the town whispers, this is what happens when you cheat, when you lie, when you disobey. And the pillory was not harmless. The longer you were held, the more your joints ached, the more your body cramped, the more you longed for the simple freedom to move. Rain poured over you, sun blistered you, flies feasted on you. Thieves sometimes lost ears or noses while locked in place, cut off as part of the sentence while the crowd jeered. Some were beaten to death by the mob while guards turned away. A mild punishment, they called it, but you would not have lasted an hour without wishing for death. Then there were cages, small iron frames hung from posts or city walls. The guilty were forced inside, their bodies twisted into unnatural shapes, left to dangle above crowds as crows pecked at them, as time withered them into skeletons. It was not quick. You could hang for days, your thirst a torment, your limbs stiffening, your voice hoarse from screaming until no sound came out. The message was not subtle. Your body belongs to the law, your death belongs to the community, and your suffering belongs to the entertainment of all. Consider the whip, another light punishment. A thief caught stealing bread might be flogged publicly, his back stripped open by lashes. 10 lashes if he was lucky, 50 if the judge was angry, 100 if someone wanted a spectacle. Flesh peeled, blood sprayed, but he survived, technically. He walked away, or crawled, scars his permanent testimony. To be whipped was to be branded without iron. Your back told your story for the rest of your life. And everyone saw it when you bent at market, when you laboured in fields, when you tried to sleep on straw. Shackles and irons were another favourite, not meant to kill, only to remind you every second that you were not free. Heavy cuffs clamped around ankles, around wrists, around necks, chained to walls, to posts, to other prisoners. You dragged them everywhere, the weight cutting into skin, bruising bones. The sound of chains rattling was the soundtrack of dungeons, an endless chorus of misery. Some prisoners carried irons for months, even years, until their bodies stooped permanently, until skin grew infected around the metal. They said this was mercy because you lived. But what kind of life was one where every movement was pain, every sound was the clink of your own bondage? And then there was the strapado, deceptively simple and terrifyingly effective. Your hands tied behind your back, a rope looped around your wrists, and then you are hoisted up until your shoulders dislocate. They call this moderate torture because it leaves no scars at first. But you know better. The pain is white hot. Your arms feel torn from their sockets. Your chest struggles for breath. Minutes feel like eternity. If you faint, they lower you, splash water, and raise you again. It is torture disguised as questioning, cruelty pretending to be measured. Public humiliation took many forms. A debtor might be forced to wear a sign around his neck, paraded through town while people mocked him. A woman accused of adultery might be shaved bald, marched through the streets in rags. A baker who sold underweight bread might be chained to his own oven, forced to endure jeers until shame seemed worse than flames. Punishment was not private. It was always staged, always performed, because fear only works if others can watch it, and you would not escape even if you were lucky enough to be sentenced to these milder methods. Because they did not end with dignity, they ended with broken spirits. Imagine yourself locked in stocks, eyes level with the filth children hurl, face stinging, body cramped, your mind unravelling from the laughter. Imagine yourself hanging from your wrists in strapado, bones shifting, the world blurring with every jolt. Imagine yourself paraded with a sign reading thief, while neighbours you grew up with spit on you. Would you call that mild? Would you call that survivable? The Middle Ages did. They insisted these punishments were merciful compared to burning, breaking, tearing. They convinced themselves they were humane because you left alive. But the scars lasted longer than any flames. And the cruelest irony? Many of these punishments were considered community bonding events. People laughed, cheered, celebrated the humiliation of others as if it were festival. The pillory in the square was both courtroom and carnival. The flogging of a thief was both sentence and spectacle. Children learned their lessons early. Do not stray, or the whip, the stocks, the laughter will claim you too. So when you imagine medieval torture, do not think only of flames and racks. Think of the laughter of neighbours while you stand in the stocks, the ache of chains biting into bone, the endless hymn of humiliation sung in jeers and rotten vegetables. These were the gentle torments, the ones judges called lenient. And you, used to privacy, dignity, the illusion of rights, would not last a single afternoon before begging for the mercy of silence that never came. You imagine that the worst is already behind you, that the pillory, the whipping post, the strappado are already the outer edge of human cruelty, but you are wrong, because the true machinery of medieval torture begins not with humiliation, but with systematic destruction of your body, bone by bone, joint by joint. And if you thought you could grit your teeth and endure, the rack will teach you otherwise. The rack is deceptively simple, a rectangular frame of wood, rollers at each end, ropes attached to your wrists and ankles. You are stretched out, helpless, your body already taut before the crank turns. The torturer does not start violently. He begins with patience, turning the handle slowly, the ropes tightening, your arms lengthening until you feel the first pop of cartilage. Your body is not meant to stretch this way. Ligaments tear, joints separate, shoulders dislocate. The pain is not sharp, but total, a scream spreading through every nerve, every muscle, and he keeps turning. Vertebrae strain, your hips shift, your knees pull apart. You feel yourself being dismantled piece by piece, a human puzzle undone by force. The genius of the rack, if cruelty can be called genius, is that it was gradual. You did not die quickly. You screamed, confessed, begged, fainted, revived, and confessed again. A session could last hours, days, each time stretching you further, each time undoing another thread of your body. Some victims left crippled, arms dangling uselessly, legs twisted, spines curved. Others left unable to leave at all. And every confession they gave, true or false, was considered holy testimony, proof that pain reveals what the soul conceals. Then there was the breaking wheel, also called the Catherine wheel, a device both execution and torture. Imagine a cartwheel laid flat, your body tied to its spokes. The executioner raises an iron bar and brings it down on your limbs, one by one, shattering bones with deliberate rhythm. Arms, legs, shins, thighs, all reduced to splinters. The crowd counts each strike. The victim howls until the howls become gasps, then silence. Sometimes they were left alive afterward, woven into the wheel like broken branches, raised upright for the public to watch as birds circled and pecked. Death came slowly, sometimes after days. The lesson was clear. Defy the law, and your body will be turned into scaffolding for fear. Consider also the iron boots, heavy metal casings locked around your legs. Wedges were hammered between boot and flesh, each strike crushing bone, splitting skin, pulping muscle. Your screams echoed in dungeon walls while your legs became useless meat. Some victims fainted after the first wedge, others endured dozens, each hammer blow driving splinters deeper. They called this persuasion. You would call it mutilation. And if that wasn't enough, there were thumb screws, small but devastating. Your thumbs or fingers placed between iron plates, screws tightened slowly, nails split, bones cracked, nerves burned. The pain was focused, sharp, unbearable. They could do it for hours, asking questions all the while. Imagine the humiliation. Such a small device, such a small joint, yet it reduced warriors to sobbing children. The brilliance of the thumbscrew was its efficiency. It left you alive, but ruined your hands, a permanent reminder that the law owned your flesh. Another favourite was the rack's cousin, the stretching ladder. Victims were tied to ladders or wooden frames, then twisted or dropped, joints popping, bones dislocating. The torturer did not need imagination. Gravity itself did the work. And of course, the iron collar and pressing weights. A victim laid flat, boards stacked on the chest, stones or iron added slowly. Breathing grew difficult, then impossible. Ribs cracked, organs ruptured. Death came eventually, but not before endless minutes of suffocation. In England, this was used to force confessions or pleas. Refuse to speak, and the waits would increase until silence turned permanent. You would like to think you could resist, that perhaps you could outsmart the torturer, hold your tongue, preserve your truth. But you would not. No one did. The rack dismantled you slowly, with patience. The wheel destroyed you publicly, with spectacle. The boots crushed you intimately, with rhythm. The screws humiliated you, with precision. Every method was designed not just to break your body, but to erase your will. To remind the community that pain was more powerful than pride, that authority could tear joints apart until obedience was automatic. And remember, none of this happened in secret. The rack might live in dungeons, but the wheel stood in the square. People gathered. They watched limbs break, listened to bones snap like branches, breathed in the smell of blood and sweat. Children learned early that law was not about fairness, it was about force. Your body was both example and entertainment. Would you survive? Number. The first pop of your shoulder, the first crack of your shin, the first scream ripped from your throat. You would beg, you would confess, you would pray for mercy that never came. And even if you somehow endured, you would leave crippled, twisted, broken, your body no longer your own. That was the point. Justice did not only want your words, it wanted your flesh as a lesson carved into bone. You thought you had already seen the limits of imagination on the rack, the wheel, the ropes, but metal and fire are a different kingdom entirely, because here pain is not improvised, it is engineered, methodical, sharpened into precision. Wooden rope can stretch you, yes, but iron can crush you, can cut you, can brand you, so that even when you stagger away, you carry the law's handwriting burned into your skin. Fire can kill, yes, but more importantly, it can linger. Smoke curling slowly, the heat building gradually, ensuring that every second is its own sermon. Metal and fire are absolute. They do not bargain, they do not hesitate, they do not leave room for doubt. Begin with branding irons, the most merciful of fiery tools. A rod of iron thrust into coals until it glows orange, sometimes white. The torturer does not need words. The sound of sizzling metal already tells you what's coming. You are held down, your skin exposed, and then the iron is pressed against you, forehead, cheek, hand. The hiss is instant, louder than your scream. Flesh bubbles, hair crackles, the stench fills your nose, and you realize with sick clarity that you are inhaling yourself. Sometimes the iron bore letters, T for thief, A for adulterer, H for heretic, so the community could read your crime every time you showed your face. Sometimes it was a symbol of authority, a crest, a seal. Always it was permanent. You carried your guilt not in a ledger, but in your flesh, marked property of justice forever. Then come the red-hot pincers, heated in the same coals until they glowed like miniature suns. The executioner clamped them onto ears, lips, fingers, tearing flesh away in smoking strips. Imagine it. The skin blackened, curled, ripped away, nerves screaming louder than your voice. The torturer could take his time, working along your body like a butcher trimming meat, each tear a punctuation mark in your confession. Witches were stripped this way, their devil's marks torn away. Men accused of blasphemy lost tongues, thieves lost noses or ears. Some lost more tender parts, each ripped away to the roar of the crowd. Now picture the iron boots, cousins to the crushing boots but crueler in their elegance. Metal casings locked around your legs, coals shoved beneath them. At first, it is heat, unbearable but survivable. Then it is blistering, your skin bubbling, peeling, fusing to the metal. And still it continues, the iron glowing, your legs literally cooking. You faint, wake to the smell of your own roasted flesh, scream again, faint again. There is no end until the torturer decides there is, or until there is nothing left of your legs but charred ruin. Survivors never walked again. Most never survived. Consider the chair of torture, iron from head to foot, its surface studded with spikes. You are strapped in naked, the spikes piercing lightly at first, drawing pinpricks of blood. Then fires are lit beneath, heating the iron until it glows. The spikes sear deeper, burning flesh as you writhe, your skin bonding to the chair itself. It is slow, deliberate, not meant to kill quickly, but to roast you alive in increments. In Germany, they called it the Judas chair. You called it eternity. There were heated plates, slabs of iron laid beneath you, coals piled below. You were strapped down, unable to move, cooking slowly like meat on a griddle. Sometimes they laid plates on your chest as well, piling stones on top until your ribs cracked under the double assault of weight and fire. The point was not just pain, but spectacle. The crowd could smell your agony before they saw it. And then there were torches, humble, brutal, flames held beneath your feet until blisters rose and burst, flames held beneath your arms, between your thighs, against your hair. Fire crept into every crevice, every nerve, intimate and merciless. A single torch could do what hours on the rack could not, break you in minutes. Confessions poured out as easily as sweat. Fire was not only a tool, but a stage. Burning at the stake was the grand finale of all medieval theatre. You are tied upright, ropes binding arms and legs, brushwood stacked around you to the waist. The crowd gathers, children on shoulders, vendors selling bread, priests murmuring prayers. A sermon is delivered about your sins, witchcraft, heresy, treason. You protest, but no one listens. Then the torch is lowered. Smoke rises first, choking, blinding. Your lungs burn before your skin does. Then the flames lick upward, feet, legs, torso. You writhe, but the ropes hold. You scream, but hymns drown you out. And through it all, the crowd watches as though at a festival. Some weep, but most nod. They tell themselves your soul is being cleansed. They tell themselves justice is being done. And when you finally collapse into charred silence, they cheer, not because they hated you personally, but because your death reassured them that order was intact. The cruelty was not random, it was ritual. Torturers heated iron slowly, deliberately, showing you the glow before applying it. They whispered threats, gave you one last chance to confess, then pressed metal to skin when you hesitated. They paced the pain, drawing it out, ensuring that each stage produced more terror than the last. It was persuasion by fire, negotiation by heat. And always the logic was the same. If you were innocent, God would protect you. If you were guilty, the flames proved it. But God never came. Only fire did. And what of the psychology? Imagine the hours before, when you heard irons heating in coals, the hiss and crack as sparks leapt. You saw the torturer smile, sweat glistening on his brow, iron glowing in his hands. You smelled burned flesh from the last victim, still clinging to the tools. Your body broke before the iron touched you, your mind confessing crimes your flesh had not yet endured. Torture did not need to burn you long. Often the anticipation did the work. This is why metal and fire reigned supreme. They left no ambiguity. A confession screamed under the rack could be dismissed by some as exaggeration, but a brand on your forehead, a missing ear, a charred corpse left no doubt. The law had spoken, the flames had cleansed, the community could sleep easy. And you were gone, or marked forever as the system's property. Would you survive this? Not a chance. The first hiss of hot iron would break you. The first torch against your feet would melt every shred of resistance. The first pincer-tearing flesh would open your mouth wider than any sermon. You would confess to anything: sorcery, heresy, treason, poisoning wells, kissing the devil himself. You would give them names you invented, stories you never lived, simply to make the fire stop. And they would nod, record it, call it justice. That was the true genius of medieval fire and metal. It did not just punish, it performed. It created truth out of agony, spectacle out of screams, order out of ash. And once the flames died, the crowd carried home the lesson. Authority has fire and flesh has none. You thought fire was final, that nothing could be worse than the slow hiss of your flesh under glowing iron. But there is another element just as merciless and perhaps even crueler for its subtlety. Water. Fire screams, fire devours, fire leaves no room for ambiguity. Water, on the other hand, pretends mercy. It is cool, it is cleansing, it is holy in the language of priests. But in the chambers of medieval justice, water was no baptism. It was a suffocation disguised as purity, a drowning repeated endlessly, without death, until your mind shattered and your mouth poured out confessions like floodwater. Start with the infamous ordeal by water, because this was as much theology as it was torture. A woman accused of witchcraft is bound, her hands and feet tied, sometimes a rope around her waist. She is dragged to the nearest pond or river, the crowd following like it's a festival. The priest mutters prayers, sprinkles holy water, declares that the elements will reveal the truth. Then she is tossed in. If she floats, the water has rejected her as unholy, proof of guilt. If she sinks, she is innocent, but dead. Either way, the logic is flawless. The water always tells the truth. You imagine yourself in her place, the cold shocking your lungs, your bound body thrashing as the crowd gasps. Your chest burns, your vision blurs. If you drown, you are vindicated too late. If you survive, you are dragged out to face the stake. A test where survival itself is incrimination. Then there is the water cure, deceptively named, because no cure ever came of it. You are bound, forced onto your back, a funnel or cloth shoved into your mouth. Then water is poured, slowly at first, then in torrents, until your stomach swells painfully, until your throat burns, until you feel yourself drowning while still on dry land. Your chest heaves, but you cannot vomit, cannot scream, cannot breathe. The body panics in ways you never thought possible. Every instinct screams for air, but every gasp brings only more water. And when you are on the edge of death, the torturer stops, lets you retch, cough, vomit, then begins again. Some endured dozens of cycles. Some never rose again, their lungs filled, their stomachs burst. For the inquisitors, this was mercy. No blood spilled, no marks left, but terror. For you, it is the closest thing to death you will ever feel while still alive. Consider ducking stools, punishments favoured for scolds and adulteresses. A chair fixed to a long beam set over water. The woman is strapped in, jeered at by the crowd, then dunked, once, twice, 10 times. Each time the chair splashes down, water fills nose and lungs, sputtering coughs drowned by laughter. Children cheer, vendors sell food, neighbours jeer. It is humiliation blended with drowning, punishment disguised as comedy. You want to scream at the injustice, but your mouth fills only with filthy river water. By the time you are hauled back up, soaked, shivering, choking, you are less person than spectacle. And then there is smothering, the silent cousin of drowning. A wet cloth forced over your face, water poured slowly so the fabric clings to your mouth and nose. It is dark, suffocating, inescapable. Every breath draws liquid deeper into lungs. You thrash, but ropes hold you. You feel your chest convulse, your vision dim. To outsiders, it looks almost peaceful. No flames, no screams, just a body jerking under a cloth. But inside, you are drowning again and again, wishing for fire because at least fire is honest. Priests defended these methods with theology. Water is pure, they said. If it kills you, it absolves you. If it spares you, it reveals your guilt. It is God's judgment, not man's cruelty. but you see the truth. It was cheap, effective, repeatable. No irons to forge, no coals to stoke, just water, rope, cloth, and terror, always terror. The cruelty of water torture was its plausibility. A crowd could pretend it was fair, that the river decided, that the ordeal was impartial. A torturer could claim he spilled no blood. A judge could call it clean. And yet you, sputtering, choking, convulsing, knew better. It was as brutal as the rack, as final as the fire, only slower and quieter. Imagine yourself strapped to the board, funnel jammed into your mouth. The first pour fills your stomach, bloating painfully. The second fills your lungs, drowning you from the inside. Your mind screams louder than your body. Confess. Anything. Everything. Just breathe again. You would name names you never heard, crimes you never committed, heresies you never believed, and they would write it down, nod solemnly, and call it truth. And the crowd, once again, would learn its lesson. They would whisper to their children, "Do not gossip, do not doubt, do not stray, or you will drink the law's water until your soul bursts." Would you endure? Never. Fire burns, but water betrays. It pretends mercy, it pretends fairness, but in the end, it drowns you anyway. You thought the wheel and the rack, the irons and the torches, the drowning tubs and funnels already covered the medieval imagination, but then you stumble into the domain of the exotic devices, the ones whispered about in chronicles and exaggerated in legend, the ones that sound too grotesque to be real until you remember that cruelty never needed realism to function. It only needed belief, and belief sharpened the blade sharper than any blacksmith ever could. Begin with the Iron Maiden, the infamous Eiserne Jungfrau, often pictured as a sarcophagus shaped like a woman, lined inside with spikes. You are led to it as though to a coffin, the crowd murmuring at the spectacle. The door swings open, spikes gleaming in torchlight. You are shoved inside, the door slams, and the spikes pierce. Not deep enough to kill immediately, but just enough to puncture flesh, to keep you upright in agony while blood drips slowly, pooling at your feet. You scream, but your voice is muffled by iron, lost in the hollow chamber. Hours, sometimes days, they say it lasted. Scholars today argue whether the maiden was truly medieval or a later invention, but to you, strapped in darkness with steel lodged in your ribs, the distinction does not matter. Myth or not, the pain is real when people believe it is. Then there is the brazen bull of Phalaris, a contraption born in ancient Sicily but retold in medieval Europe as if cruelty were timeless. A hollow brass bull, polished, with a door in its side. You are stripped, forced inside, the door sealed. A fire is lit beneath, heating the brass until it glows. The air inside becomes an oven, your flesh searing, lungs filling with smoke. Your screams echo through pipes designed to transform them into the sound of a bellowing bull. To the crowd, it is theatre. The bull moans, the condemned roasts, the executioner smiles. Whether or not every town square had such a beast is irrelevant. The legend alone terrified, and fear was enough to keep peasants obedient. And of course, the stake through the body, the punishment by impalement, crude, simple, devastating. You are stripped, forced onto a sharpened pole. It is not quick. The stake is driven slowly, deliberately, through the body, sometimes from below, sometimes through the torso, emerging from mouth or shoulder. You are hoisted upright, the stake planted in earth, your body writhing like a grotesque banner in the wind. Death takes hours, even days, as organs tear, blood drains, shock devours. This was Vlad the Impaler's favourite, and his legend spread across Europe like a fever. To imagine yourself skewered this way is to realise that death is not always release, but spectacle. Your agony extended so that every onlooker learns obedience in your silence. There was also the saw, an execution tool, but sometimes a torture in its own right. You are bound upside down, legs spread. A saw is pressed to your crotch, pulled downward. Gravity keeps you conscious longer as blood pools in your head. The saw bites slowly, steadily, until you are split in two. To the executioner, it is carpentry. To the crowd, theatre. To you, eternity. Exotic, too, were the cradle of Judas and the Spanish donkey, devices shaped like pyramids or sharpened beams. You are stripped, hoisted, and lowered so that your weight rests on the point. The pressure tears flesh, dislocates hips, ruptures organs. The longer you are left, the more your body collapses. To outsiders, it is too grotesque to imagine. To you, it is only the new definition of sitting. And consider the pair of anguish, an iron device shaped like a fruit, inserted into mouth, rectum, or vagina, then expanded with a screw until tissue tore, jaws snapped, organs ruptured. Whether it was truly common or largely legend does not matter. You believe in it because your torturer believes in it, because fear of it is enough to wring confessions before it is ever unscrewed. These exotic devices were not daily tools. They were whispers, stories, exaggerated by travellers, repeated by inquisitors, catalogued by later centuries, eager to illustrate medieval barbarity. But for you, kneeling in a dungeon lit by fire, hearing the creak of metal, smelling the sweat of the executioner, the line between legend and reality blurs. You do not care if the Iron Maiden truly stood in Nuremberg or was a later invention. If the door swings shut on you, the myth becomes real enough. And the cruelest irony? These contraptions were justified as civilizing. The Iron Maiden was said to punish without messy blood. The bull turned screams into music. The stake displayed disobedience like a banner. Pain was not random. It was engineered, aesthetic, transformed into ritual. Torture was not only about breaking you, it was about creating art from agony, theatre from suffering. You were not simply killed, you were staged. Would you survive it? Number. The first spike of the maiden would drain your courage. The first spark beneath the bull would suffocate you in terror before the flames ever licked. The first inch of the stake would erase every prayer, every defiance, leaving only the animal's shriek. Exotic or not, real or not, the stories alone would shatter you, because in the Middle Ages, rumour was as powerful as iron. You think torture belongs in the shadows, hidden in dungeons, whispered about but never seen. But in the Middle Ages, torture and execution were not only justice, they were theatre, staged for maximum visibility, scheduled like holidays, attended like carnivals. To be punished was not only to suffer, it was to become entertainment, a living sermon for neighbours, children, merchants, priests, and anyone curious enough to leave work early. And if you imagine you would have turned away, refused to watch, kept your dignity, you are lying to yourself. Because everyone went, and not to go would mark you as suspicious. Picture the town square. It smells of sweat, manure, roasted meat from vendors who drag carts in, knowing there will be business. Stalls close early, workers abandon fields, children are lifted onto shoulders. The execution platform is raised high, wooden beams reinforced, ropes checked, wheels and chains displayed like stage props. This is not shameful, it is expected. The same way you expect fireworks on holidays, they expected whips, wheels and flames. The authorities understood the importance of audience. Justice was not justice unless it was seen. A thief whipped in private taught no lesson. A thief whipped before the entire town taught thousands. The more public, the more persuasive. Pain, when shared, became law. You were meant to see the sweat, hear the screams, smell the blood, feel the weight of fear settle into your stomach. And the point was clear. Disobedience hurts. And it was not monotonous. Every execution was staged differently, designed for spectacle. Some began with a procession, the condemned dragged through the streets, chains clinking, crowds jeering, priests shouting prayers. The condemned sometimes wore signs of their crimes, a loaf of bread for a thief, a painted devil for a witch. People laughed, mocked, spat. Others stood silently, some praying, some trembling, all waiting for the grand finale. The punishments themselves were paced like theatre acts. First humiliation, stocks, signs, shaved heads. Then pain, floggings, brandings, mutilations. Finally climax, fire, rope, wheel. It was storytelling with blood. The opening act made you laugh, the middle made you gasp, the finale made you cheer. And cheer they did. Children squealed, vendors shouted, neighbors argued about whether the condemned was guilty. Priests preached that God's will was visible in every scream. It was not horror. It was lesson wrapped in spectacle. People went home satisfied, believing they had seen justice, but also thrilled by the drama. Consider the burning of witches. Entire villages gathered. Sermons were preached first, accusing the condemned of dancing with devils, of poisoning wells, of seducing men. Then the torch lowered, flames caught, smoke billowed. The crowd hushed, then roared as fire consumed. Parents lifted children to see better, whispering, "Learn! This is what happens to liars, to rebels, to women who stray." The witch screamed until smoke stole her voice. Some cried, many prayed, most nodded, content that order had been restored. Or think of the breaking wheel. The executioner raised his iron bar, the crowd counting each strike as bones shattered. 12 blows, 15, 20. The condemned moaned, gasped, fell silent. His body was woven into the wheel, raised like grotesque scaffolding. Birds circled, pecking at flesh. And the crowd dispersed slowly, discussing the quality of the executioner's aim, comparing this wheel to the last. Executions were scheduled, announced, anticipated. Town criers shouted dates, inns filled with visitors from surrounding villages. Markets thrived, vendors selling bread, ale, toys. It was commerce and community. Your suffering was someone else's holiday. And if you think they watched reluctantly, you are mistaken. People wanted spectacle. Life was monotonous, full of toil, hunger, silence. Executions were rare drama, theatre without script. They entertained as much as they warned. Some came for the moral lesson, others simply for excitement. Everyone came because not coming was suspicious. To absent yourself from justice was to risk being mistaken for sympathizer, heretic, rebel. And sometimes the condemned fought back with dignity, turning theatre upside down. Some sang hymns while flames consumed them, unnerving the crowd. Some cursed their tormentors until the last breath. Some begged pitifully, fueling gossip for months. Each performance left its mark, not only in ashes, but in memory. For the authorities, this was ideal. The crowd left not only entertained, but disciplined. They whispered at night, "Did you see? Did you hear the screams? We must obey." Fear soaked deeper than law. Pain seen was more convincing than decrees heard. Imagine yourself in that crowd. Would you look away? Would you protest? Number you would stare, half horrified, half fascinated. You would gasp with others, laugh nervously, perhaps even cheer, because to stay silent was to stand out, and standing out was dangerous. You would join, because everyone joined. And later you would dream of it, blood, fire, screams, while telling yourself it was justice. That was the reality. Torture was not hidden. It was staged. And you, whether victim or spectator, were part of the play. You might hope that torture was just an accident of history, a grotesque detour in humanity's march toward reason, but the truth is more unsettling. Torture lasted so long, not because it was effective at finding truth. It wasn't. But because it was effective at everything else. It disciplined communities. It entertained crowds. It confirmed the power of church and crown. It justified itself endlessly, adapting like a parasite, feeding on fear, tradition, and human appetite for spectacle. And if you think you would have been the exception, standing bravely against it, refusing to confess, refusing to attend, refusing to participate, then you have already forgotten how much safer it is to blend into the crowd than to risk being the one strapped to the rack. Torture persisted because it answered needs. For rulers, it was efficiency. Armies cost money, bureaucracies require literacy, but pain is cheap. A rack can be built by any carpenter, a whip plaited by any tanner, a fire stoked by any boy with a torch. Why pay clerks to investigate? Why pay judges to deliberate when you can stretch a man until he names names? For priests, it was theology. Pain purifies, they said. Agony reveals truth. Confession under torment was written down in solemn script, stamped with God's authority, and held up as proof that the system worked. Never mind that people confessed to flying through the night, to fornicating with demons, to poisoning wells they had never seen. The words were what mattered, not the reality. And for the people, for the crowds who gathered, jeered, prayed and cheered, torture was both lesson and entertainment. In a life where toil and hunger were constant, where festivals were rare and execution was drama, it was also reassurance. See, the law is strong, the church is vigilant, order is preserved. Watching someone else burn was proof that you, at least for now, were safe. Fear welded the community together more tightly than faith. Torture also endured because it was flexible. It could punish witches, heretics, thieves, rebels, beggars, debtors, traitors, strangers. It needed no evidence, only accusation. It left no loophole. If you confessed, you were guilty. If you resisted, you were guilty of resisting. If you died under torture, you were guilty enough for God to have taken you. Every path led to the same conclusion. The system was never wrong. And it lasted because humans adapt, not only victims, but spectators. At first, you are horrified. Then, you are accustomed. Then, you are entertained. Generations grew up watching bodies break, bones shatter, witches burn. Children laughed, adults nodded, priests blessed. Horror became habit, habit became tradition, tradition became justice. Would you have done differently? Number you would have watched, perhaps reluctantly at first, but you would have watched. You would have whispered that maybe she wasn't a witch, maybe he didn't deserve the wheel, but you would have whispered it quietly in your own house with the shutters closed. And when the day came, when the crier announced another execution, you would have gone because everyone went. To stay away was to stand out. To stand out was to be accused. To be accused was to be broken. Better to blend into the crowd, to shout with them, to hide inside the noise. That is why torture lasted so long. Not because it found truth, not because it delivered justice, but because it served power, satisfied fear, entertained masses, and silenced dissent. It endured because it worked, not in the way it claimed, but in the way authority needed. And what does it say about humanity? That cruelty is not anomaly, but possibility, waiting for excuse. That fear makes neighbours complicit. That pain can be dressed as piety, as justice, as necessity, and people will accept it, so long as the fire is not yet at their own feet. Torture did not vanish because humanity became kinder. It vanished because systems of power found more efficient tools: prisons, police, paperwork. The rack was replaced by the cell, the whip by the ledger, the wheel by bureaucracy. Pain became invisible, but it never left. The lesson is sobering. If you think the Middle Ages were barbaric and we are civilized, remember that cruelty only changes costume. Would you have survived that world? Number you would have confessed, screamed, burned, floated, broken like everyone else. And you would have watched others suffer too, because survival demanded it. torture lasted because it always had volunteers to inflict, victims to endure, and crowds to witness. And perhaps the darkest truth of all, because somewhere, deep inside, people wanted to see. You close the book of torture, thinking perhaps you have walked far enough away from it, that centuries have built walls between you and the hiss of hot irons, the creak of ropes, the hiss of water poured down a gagging throat. But the walls are thin, the echoes are still there. The Middle Ages ended, but the logic of pain never left. It only moved into different chambers, wore cleaner clothes, carried different justifications. You tell yourself you would never have survived. But the darker truth is simpler. You would have adapted because everyone did. And in adapting, you would have become part of it. The rack is gone, but prisons still stretch people, not with ropes, but with endless time. The wheel is gone, but lives are still broken, only now in silence, out of sight, away from squares and crowds. The flames of the stake are gone, but fire still consumes, dropped from planes, sparked by bombs, justified as necessity. And the crowd is still there too, not gathered in squares, but watching screens, nodding at images of suffering, telling themselves it is justice, that it is deserved, that it is necessary. The theatre has changed, not the script. The lesson of medieval torture is not simply that people were cruel, but that cruelty is patient. It waits for excuses, it waits for rituals, it waits for belief. In the Middle Ages, belief was that pain revealed truth, that God would protect the innocent. Today the beliefs are different, but the pattern is the same. Justify first, then inflict. And always the same refrain. It is not cruelty, it is order. It is not sadism, it is salvation. It is not violence, it is justice. What the Middle Ages did openly, we do quietly. What they displayed, we conceal. What they shouted, we whisper. But the mechanics are familiar. Authority always finds a way to turn bodies into theatre, whether through flames, cells, or silence. And people always gather, whether in a square or behind a screen, to nod, to watch, to tell themselves this is necessary. Would you survive medieval torture? Number, would you resist it? Number, would you participate, even as a spectator? Yes. That is the bitter conclusion. Because survival is not about courage, but about obedience. And when obedience demands you watch, you watch. When obedience demands you confess, you confess. When obedience demands you burn, you burn. Moving on to the next story, we'll explore the everyday tasks and traditions of Egyptian pharaohs. You do not wake because you want to, nor because your body is ready, but because the sun itself has been choreographed to pull you from sleep. Its first rays sneaking through carefully aligned windows that the architects of your palace designed centuries earlier, so that when Ra rises above the eastern horizon, his light will strike your chamber exactly as it should, bathing your walls of painted limestone in that particular golden shimmer, which tells you, without words, that the world is in order and you are the reason for it. You inhale, and what fills your lungs is not the smoke of 1,000 cooking fires from the villages, nor the sweat of labourers in the fields, but the faint perfume of kaife, a mixture of resins, herbs, wine, honey and fat, burned last night by priests in the household shrine, still lingering like a memory of sanctity clinging to the carved recesses. Even before your eyes open, you know your position. Not just man, not just king, but axis, the pivot upon which Egypt insists the universe turns. Already the machinery of your household is awake and moving around you, silent but never absent. Servants pad barefoot across polished floors, carrying jugs of cool water drawn from cisterns before dawn. A steward whispers to the chief cook about which delicacies will appear at the morning table. The overseer of clothing fusses over the folds of linen, making sure not a single crease is visible, because a pharaoh cannot present himself to the gods or to his officials looking like he slept in anything less than perfection. You are still half beneath your linen coverlets, but you are no longer private. You have never been private. From the moment you came squalling into the world with 5 names, throne name, birth name, Horus name, golden Horus name, 2 ladies' name, you belong to ritual. Even now, half awake, your body is already a text being read by others, a hieroglyph made of flesh. The attendants bring you perfumes, cones of fat mixed with resins and oils that they place upon your shaved scalp, so that through the day they will melt and release fragrance, masking the sweat that comes from living in a climate that never forgives. Coal is prepared for your eyes, not a matter of vanity, but of medicine and magic. Both. The black lines drawn carefully along the rims of your lids reduce glare from the sun, ward off infection, and tell every watcher that you are not merely mortal, but a participant in the eternal combat between order and chaos, a face inscribed with divine geometry. Another servant washes your hands with cool water, catches the runoff in a basin of alabaster so it can be poured on the garden soil as a blessing, because nothing you do, not even rinsing your fingers, is allowed to be meaningless. The dressing begins, and dressing a pharaoh is not clothing a body, but arming a principle. First, the shendet, a pleated linen kilt, its folds so sharp and stiff with starch that they resemble the furrows of irrigated fields. Then a broad collar of faience and gold beads, a rainbow across your chest that proclaims you as much a symbol of fertility as of power. Sandals are brought, sometimes papyrus for ceremony, sometimes leather for practical walking, but always with soles embossed with the images of enemies, Libyans, Nubians, Asiatics, so that every step you take is literally crushing foreigners beneath your feet. A crook and a flail may be placed in your hands for the day's appearances, not because you need to herd sheep or thrash grain, but because these objects tell every eye that you are both shepherd and disciplinarian, caretaker and executioner, life-giver and life-taker. And then the crowns, each a sentence in the grammar of rule. The tall white headgear of Upper Egypt, the low red deshret of Lower Egypt, combined together into the double-crowned schent for when you wish to remind everyone that you embody the unity of both lands. The blue kepresh for military occasions, studded with golden discs, making your head look like the very dome of heaven armed for battle. The atef crown, with feathers rising beside a solar disc, for rituals. Each crown is a line of text in the performance of kingship, and you, sitting silently while they adjust the weight on your brow, are the page upon which those lines are written. Me. Before you taste food, you make offering. A small shrine within the palace is waiting, its niches already crowded with loaves, beer, vegetables, meat, milk. Priests chant low and monotonous invocations. Incense coils upward. You raise your hand to the smoke and draw it toward your face, symbolically inhaling the good breath that connects you to the gods. A miniature procession of bowls and jars is placed before you, each one accompanied by recited formulae. Bread for sustenance, beer for joy, greens for rebirth, meat for strength, milk for purity. You do not eat these offerings, but your gesture toward them is a necessary fiction. The gods consume their essence, you consume their favor. Only after this act of synchronization between man and heaven can you proceed to your own meal. The breakfast itself is simple compared to what lies in store later. Bread, beer thick enough to serve as porridge, dates, figs, grapes, sometimes cheese or fresh milk. A piece of meat if the kitchen is generous. But simplicity here is not poverty, it is statement. Even the pharaoh, the richest man in the land, begins his day with the same staples as his people. You chew slowly, attendants waiting with cloths to dab your fingers, scribes already preparing their rolls of papyrus, because as soon as you finish swallowing, the flood of administration begins. Egypt never sleeps. It only pauses at night to rearrange its papers. The vizier approaches first, carrying petitions, tax records, judgments. then the overseer of granaries with tallies of wheat, barley, emmer. The chief of works arrives with fragments of stone from quarries, samples to show the quality of limestone and granite. Each man bows, touches the ground, presents his report. You nod, perhaps ask a question, perhaps merely let silence do the work. Decisions are marked not by your words alone, but by the simple gesture of taking or ignoring a scroll, a look that signals to scribes whether to record approval or punishment. By now the sun is climbing and the palace is a hive. Courtyards echo with orders, messengers run down corridors, fan bearers keep the air moving, guards shift their spears in ritual unison. From the women's quarters come faint strains of music, not for you, but for the daughters and wives whose duties include weaving cloth for temple offerings. Somewhere in the palace kitchens, oxen are being slaughtered, their thigh bones destined for tonight's feast or tomorrow's sacrifices. Beyond the walls, boats are unloading cedar from Lebanon, gold from Nubia, lapis from Afghanistan, all of it destined to pass through your hands, even if only symbolically. This is still morning. You have not yet presided over a ritual in the great temple, not yet heard envoys grovel with their tributes, not yet reviewed the troops drilling with chariots in the desert, but already you have lived a day more ritualized than anything a modern imagination can bear, because to be pharaoh is not to be free, it is to be a cog in the grandest machine of order the ancient world ever built, a machine that insists on the same rituals every dawn, the same gestures every morning, the same offerings, the same prayers, repeated until they become the architecture of time itself. And if you wonder why Egypt lasted longer than any other civilization, the answer lies here, in this suffocating predictability. You wake, you wash, you are painted, perfumed, dressed, crowned, offered, fed, petitioned. You are not a man, but a repetition. And repetition in Egypt was eternity. You might imagine kingship as freedom, the ability to rise when you wish, speak when you wish, command on a whim. But the pharaoh's court life in the height of Egypt's power is less like being a man and more like being the axle of a wheel. You do not move because you want to, you move because everything else turns around you. And if you falter for even a moment, the entire contraption squeals and collapses. From the moment the vizier steps into your hall, head bent low, scrolls tucked beneath his arm, you realize you are not free. You are chained, not with rope or iron, but with the bureaucracy of a nation that stretches from the delta of the Nile to the edge of deserts where sand buries everything careless enough to be forgotten. The vizier is the first and loudest voice, a man who is both servant and shadow king, the mouth of the pharaoh, as inscriptions call him. He kneels, presses lips to the ground, and then begins what will become the entire rhythm of your day, petitions, judgments, endless problems disguised as prayers. He tells you of disputes in the Hall of Two Truths, where peasants squabble over fields erased by floodwaters. He tells you of tomb builders demanding more bread because their rations have gone mouldy. He tells you of priests squabbling over which temple deserves more incense this month, as if the gods were merchants negotiating over fees. He talks, and scribes stand behind him, their palettes ready, their brushes dipped, recording not just what he says, but how you twitch your eye, whether your lips tighten, whether you nod too quickly. Because in Egypt, governance is not about speeches. It is about glances transformed into policy by men with reed pens. Scribes, endless, tireless, invisible to all but indispensable to everything. They crouch on mats, their palettes smeared with red and black ink, papyrus scrolls rolled out across their knees. They record harvest tallies, labor assignments, border disputes, tax receipts, offerings to temples, marriages, deaths. They write lists of lists, indexes of indexes, each stroke a mark that pins chaos to order. Without them, Egypt collapses. With them, Egypt suffocates in its own precision. They are the arteries of your state, and you are their beating heart, even if sometimes you feel more like a heart trapped in a jar, pounding only because ritual commands it. The officials parade in like a tide, each one carrying a fragment of the world on his back. The overseer of granaries bows, unrolling tallies that show the river's gift of silt measured in sacks of barley. The overseer of works presents fragments of stone from distant quarries, explaining why granite must come from Aswan while limestone can be taken from nearer cliffs. The overseer of cattle rattles off numbers of bulls and calves, each beast a line of wealth, each hide a future robe, each thigh a temple sacrifice. The overseer of foreign lands kneels, presenting ivory, incense, gold dust from Nubia, cedar logs from Byblos, copper from Sinai, lapis from Afghanistan, as if the world itself has bent low to pour its veins into your treasury. But it is not treasure you hear, it is math. How many men died hauling that cedar? How many donkeys collapsed beneath that copper? How much grain must be diverted to feed quarry workers carving obelisks for the next temple? Every gift comes with its hidden price, and you are expected to know it, to nod at the right time, to ask the one question that shows you are awake, that shows the God within you still cares about the lives of mortals, even though you long ago learned that caring is a kind of exhaustion. Court life is choreography. Every official knows where to kneel, how to bow, when to speak. Guards stand in rows with spears that glint but are never used. Fan-bearers wave ostrich plumes in rhythm. Boys hold fly whisks that swing like pendulums. To outsiders, it looks like ceremony. To you, it feels like drowning in precision. You cannot sneeze without a dozen men recording it as an omen. You cannot sigh without a priest interpreting it as divine dissatisfaction. You are less a man than a hieroglyph carved into the air, your every gesture frozen in ritual. And then the petitions begin, not from grandees, but from the lower ranks, brought in by the vizier to remind you that you are still tethered to the people. A farmer bows so low, his forehead cracks against stone, begging for relief from taxes because his field was swallowed by flood. A widow holds her child forward, pleading for bread because her husband died quarrying stone for your last monument. A craftsman claims he was cheated by a foreman, that his wages were stolen. Each voice rises in terror. Each one calls you Lord of the Two Lands, Son of Ra, great in justice. But you know what they want. Mercy. And mercy is costly. Show it too often, and the officials mutter that you are weak. Show it too rarely, and the people mutter that you are cruel. Balance is not justice. Balance is exhaustion turned into ritual smiles. Behind it all stand the priests, never silent, never absent. They remind you that temples must be fed, that gods demand offerings, that processions need gold, that festivals require oxen without blemish. They quote hymns to prove their case as if divinity itself is bargaining with you. You nod, you agree, you allocate. And always in the back of your mind, you remember that priests write history. If they turn against you, your cartouche may be chiseled out, your name forgotten, your afterlife jeopardized. Power is never absolute. It is a fragile balance between officials, priests, scribes, soldiers, peasants, and your own weary hands trying to hold them all together. You do not speak much. Pharaohs are not orators. You gesture, you nod. You occasionally utter phrases that scribes will record in glowing ink. Let may it prevail. So it is ordered. Let it be done. But behind those phrases are hours of listening, nodding, pretending that you are divine judgment incarnate, when in truth you are simply tired. Court life is endless, and it repeats daily, as predictable as the Nile. Grain, stone, cattle, incense, petitions, taxes, judgments, offerings. Repeat until death, and then your son takes your place, repeating the same motions, speaking the same words, drowning in the same precision. And if you wonder why Egypt endured for millennia, the answer lies here. Bureaucracy was its immortality. Pharaohs died, dynasties collapsed, invaders came and went, but the machinery of scribes and viziers kept turning. You, sitting on the throne, are less king than cog, necessary but replaceable, divine yet exhausted. And your court, with all its rituals and repetitions, is not a burden unique to you, but the skeleton that holds up the body of Egypt itself. You are not merely a king. That is the first mistake outsiders make, imagining your job is about commanding armies or hoarding treasure. No, your crown is heavier than that. You are Pharaoh, which means you are the high priest of every temple, the first voice in every hymn, the one whose body is a pipeline between heaven and earth. The man expected to breathe on behalf of gods and bleed on behalf of people. It sounds magnificent when carved into stone. It feels suffocating when lived in flesh. The priests will tell you that the gods need feeding. Every morning, at every temple, statues of Amun, Ra, Ptah, Horus, Hathor, Anubis are awakened, bathed, perfumed, dressed, offered loaves, beer, beef, fruit, incense. But do you imagine gods dress themselves? No, mortals do, and you are the ultimate mortal, the one who must symbolically perform these actions to guarantee that crops grow, Nile floods, stars rise, and the sun does not forget to return tomorrow. You cannot skip this. If you falter, priests whisper, the king has failed in Mayat. Order cracks, chaos seeps. So you walk through hyper-style halls, the air thick with incense, pillars carved with your own image smiting enemies, always smiting, always victorious, while real enemies still plot on the borders. You approach the sanctuary, small, dark, more claustrophobic than grand, because the closer you are to a god, the less room there is for breathing. The priests chant, but step aside, because they know their role. They are stagehands, you are the actor, the god is the audience. You open the shrine, gaze at the figure, gold face staring with blank eternity, and you bow, wash, anoint, offer. You do not eat the food. The gods consume its essence, you consume the leftovers later. It is theatre disguised as ritual, ritual disguised as survival. Festivals expand this ritual into national theatre. Take the Opet festival in Thebes. Once a year, the statues of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu leave Karnak, travel by bark along the Nile to Luxor Temple, escorted by priests, musicians, dancers, soldiers, crowds. You are there at the center, visible to all, your body painted, your crown gleaming, your gestures slow and deliberate, because thousands of eyes are watching to see if divinity leaks out of you like light through shutters. The crowd cheers, drums pound, incense clouds, and you smile faintly, though you are exhausted, because this is not joy, but responsibility. If the festival falters, the people will murmur, perhaps the gods are displeased, perhaps famine will come. Your smile is grain in their silos. Consider the Sed festival, celebrated after 30 years of rule, then repeated every 3 years. It is not a party, it is a test. You must run, yes, run, around markers symbolizing the borders of Egypt, proving you still have the vigor to embody Horus, to hold the two lands together. Imagine yourself old, weary, your joints aching, yet dressed in ceremonial robes, expected to sprint before cheering crowds. They call it rejuvenation. You call it humiliation disguised as theology. Fail and whispers spread. The king is weak, chaos approaches. Succeed, and they carve another relief of you sprinting forever, even as you limp back to your chamber half dead. Temples are not places of peace for you. They are workspaces, obligations carved in sandstone. Each god has a temple, each temple has festivals, each festival requires your presence. You cannot possibly be in all places at once, but the fiction is that you are. Priests act in your name, sacrifices are your sacrifices, hymns are sung as if your throat were chanting them. The people see statues carried on shoulders, but they see you too, the living God walking among them. And they believe the Nile rises because you offered beer correctly, that storms are tamed because you lit incense at the right hour. If anything goes wrong, drought, plague, invasion. They blame not Amun or Ra, but you, because the bridge between heaven and earth cannot crack without dragging the whole nation down. And the rituals are endless. At sunrise, you offer incense. At noon, you pour libations. At sunset, you close shrines, recite formulae, seal doors. During eclipses, you must stand before terrified crowds and assure them that your prayers will return the sun. During floods, you must kneel on muddy banks and throw offerings into the river, pleading with Hapi, the god of inundation, to spread silt generously. During drought, you must slaughter oxen, pour their blood on altars so that priests can declare the earth satisfied. At night, you must perform rituals to help Ra battle Apophis, the chaos serpent, in the underworld. You, standing in a chamber with priests chanting, stabbing wax figurines with knives, burning effigies of serpents, also the sun will rise tomorrow. And you are watched, always watched. Priests analyze your gestures, your tone, your hesitation. If your hand trembles pouring beer, they whisper omens. If your voice cracks during hymns, they mutter discontent. The people see only the perfect image, pharaoh, divine, unbroken. But you know your body is failing, your patience thinning, your humanity straining under centuries of ritual expectation. You cannot show it. A god cannot limp. A god cannot yawn. A god cannot sneeze without someone reading it as apocalypse. And yet you endure because this is the deal carved into stone. You are Pharaoh, high priest, living Horus. You feed gods with offerings. Gods feed Egypt with Nile and sun. Egypt feeds you with obedience. Break the chain, and everything collapses. You would like to be just a man, perhaps hunting in the marshes, perhaps drinking too much beer with friends. But kingship is not hunting, it is not drinking. Kingship is priesthood without pause, ritual without end, responsibility without mercy. So when people imagine you reclining on golden thrones surrounded by dancers and music, they miss the truth. Your throne is a pulpit, your crown is a collar, your smile is a liturgy. You are not free, not ever. You are the hinge upon which gods and men meet, and hinges do not move where they wish. They only creak when forced. You are not merely a king. That is the first mistake outsiders make, imagining your job is about commanding armies or hoarding treasure. No, your crown is heavier than that. You are Pharaoh, which means you are the high priest of every temple, the first voice in every hymn, the one whose body is a pipeline between heaven and earth, the man expected to breathe on behalf of gods and bleed on behalf of people. It sounds magnificent when carved into stone. It feels suffocating when lived in flesh. The priests will tell you that the gods need feeding. Every morning, at every temple, statues of Amun, Ra, Ptah, Horus, Hathor, Anubis are awakened, bathed, perfumed, dressed, offered loaves, beer, beef, fruit, incense. But do you imagine gods dress themselves? No, mortals do, and you are the ultimate mortal, the one who must symbolically perform these actions to guarantee that crops grow, Nile floods, stars rise, and the sun does not forget to return tomorrow. You cannot skip this. If you falter, priests whisper, the king has failed in Mayat. Order cracks, chaos seeps. So you walk through hypostyle halls, the air thick with incense, pillars carved with your own image smiting enemies, always smiting, always victorious, while real enemies still plot on the borders. You approach the sanctuary, small, dark, more claustrophobic than grand, because the closer you are to a god, the less room there is for breathing. The priests chant, but step aside, because they know their role. They are stagehands. You are the actor. The god is the audience. You open the shrine, gaze at the figure, gold face staring with blank eternity, and you bow, wash, anoint, offer. You do not eat the food. The gods consume its essence, you consume the leftovers later. It is theatre disguised as ritual, ritual disguised as survival. Festivals expand this ritual into national theatre. Take the Opet Festival in Thebes. Once a year, the statues of Amun, Mut and Khonsu leave Karnak, travel by bark along the Nile to Luxor Temple, escorted by priests, musicians, dancers, soldiers, crowds. You are there at the center, visible to all, your body painted, your crown gleaming, your gestures slow and deliberate, because thousands of eyes are watching to see if divinity leaks out of you like light through shutters. The crowd cheers, drums pound, incense clouds, and you smile faintly, though you are exhausted, because this is not joy, but responsibility. If the festival falters, the people will murmur. Perhaps the gods are displeased. Perhaps famine will come. Your smile is grain in their silos. Consider the Sed festival, celebrated after 30 years of rule, then repeated every 3 years. It is not a party. It is a test. You must run, yes, run, around markers symbolizing the borders of Egypt, proving you still have the vigor to embody Horus, to hold the two lands together. Imagine yourself old, weary, your joints aching, yet dressed in ceremonial robes, expected to sprint before cheering crowds. They call it rejuvenation. You call it humiliation, disguised as theology. Fail and whispers spread. The king is weak, chaos approaches. Succeed, and they carve another relief of you sprinting forever, even as you limp back to your chamber, half dead. Temples are not places of peace for you. They are workspaces, obligations carved in sandstone. Each god has a temple, each temple has festivals, each festival requires your presence. You cannot possibly be in all places at once, but the fiction is that you are. Priests act in your name, sacrifices are your sacrifices. Hymns are sung as if your throat were chanting them. The people see statues carried on shoulders, but they see you too, the living God walking among them. And they believe the Nile rises because you offered beer correctly, that storms are tamed because you lit incense at the right hour. If anything goes wrong, drought, plague, invasion, they blame not Amun or Ra, but you, because the bridge between heaven and earth cannot crack without dragging the whole nation down. And the rituals are endless. At sunrise, you offer incense. At noon, you pour libations. At sunset, you close shrines, recite formulae, seal doors. During eclipses, you must stand before terrified crowds and assure them that your prayers will return the sun. During floods, you must kneel on muddy banks and throw offerings into the river, pleading with Hapi, the god of inundation, to spread silt generously. During drought, you must slaughter oxen, pour their blood on altars so that priests can declare the earth satisfied. At night, you must perform rituals to help Ra battle Apophis, the chaos serpent in the underworld. You, standing in a chamber with priests chanting, stabbing wax figurines with knives, burning effigies of serpents, also the sun will rise tomorrow. And you are watched, always watched. Priests analyze your gestures, your tone, your hesitation. If your hand trembles pouring beer, they whisper omens. If your voice cracks during hymns, they mutter discontent. The people see only the perfect image, pharaoh, divine, unbroken, but you know your body is failing, your patience thinning, your humanity straining under centuries of ritual expectation. You cannot show it. A god cannot limp. A god cannot yawn. A god cannot sneeze without someone reading it as apocalypse. And yet you endure because this is the deal carved into stone. You are Pharaoh, high priest, living Horus. You feed gods with offerings. Gods feed Egypt with Nile and sun. Egypt feeds you with obedience. Break the chain and everything collapses. You would like to be just a man, perhaps hunting in the marshes, perhaps drinking too much beer with friends, but kingship is not hunting, it is not drinking. Kingship is priesthood without pause, ritual without end, responsibility without mercy. So when people imagine you reclining on golden thrones surrounded by dancers and music, they miss the truth. Your throne is a pulpit. Your crown is a collar. Your smile is a liturgy. You are not free, not ever. You're the hinge upon which gods and men meet, and hinges do not move where they wish. They only creak when forced. You imagine a feast as a reward, as rest after the suffocating grind of bureaucracy and the suffocating dust of campaigns. But for Pharaoh, there is no such thing as rest. Even in banquets, even in the smell of roasted oxen and the clatter of harps, you are not simply eating, drinking, and laughing. You are being watched, measured, remembered. Every gesture you make at the table is a statement, every mouthful a declaration, every smile a hieroglyph carved in the minds of priests and courtiers. Pharaoh does not relax. Pharaoh performs, even with wine staining his lips. The palace feast begins with abundance that is carefully curated because excess is the message. Slaves and servants line up platters heavy with bread shaped like suns and crescents, loaves sprinkled with coriander, figs piled high like miniature pyramids. Oxen are slaughtered, their haunches roasted until fat drips onto clay hearths. Geese and ducks are stuffed with dates and onions, their skin crisping, their scent filling the hall. Fish, fresh from the Nile, still glistening, are laid beside bowls of garlic, chickpeas, lentils, honeyed beer. Jars of wine, imported from the Delta, red as blood, are uncorked, poured into alabaster goblets so heavy they require both hands. Everything is exaggerated, overflowing, designed to say not only the king is satisfied, but the land is plentiful because the king exists. The guests are chosen carefully. High officials, foreign envoys, generals returned from campaigns, priests from powerful temples. They bow as they enter, pressing their lips to the floor before being allowed to sit on mats or low couches. You, of course, sit higher, always higher, on a gilded chair carved with lions, their teeth bared in eternal snarl. Musicians play from the side, harps, lutes, flutes, sistrum shaken rhythmically, voices chanting hymns to Hathor, goddess of music, of intoxication, of joy. Dancers move with slow precision, their linen skirts swishing, their hair braided with gold beads, their gestures rehearsed 1,000 times until each flick of the wrist looks spontaneous. But the feast is not for you to indulge. It is for others to watch you indulge correctly. You must sip wine, but not guzzle, taste beef, but not choke, smile at music, but not laugh too freely. Pharaoh must embody Mayat even while drunk, balance, harmony, moderation. Too much joy, and whispers say you are weak. Too little, and whispers say you're joyless, inhuman. Balance again, always balance. Even in pleasure, you are a servant of appearances. Women surround you, not as lovers, but as symbols. The great wife sits closest, her jewelry heavy with gold, her coal-lined eyes watching carefully. Beside her are other wives, princesses given in marriage by foreign kings, concubines of noble birth. Around them swirl attendants, dancers, singers, perfumed girls carrying fans, trays of fruit, bowls of ointment. Each one is a reminder. Pharaoh is fertility embodied. Pharaoh is luxury incarnate. Pharaoh is the man who has more women than anyone else in Egypt. But again, this is theatre. Do you desire them? Perhaps. Does it matter? Not at all. What matters is that the sight of you among them reassures the people that Egypt's prosperity is mirrored in your bedchamber, that the land is fertile because you are fertile, that abundance in palace equals abundance in fields. Foreign envoys watch everything, their eyes darting nervously as they taste bread, as they sip wine. They are watching to see if you smile at them, if you offer them a roasted goose, if you nod at their toasts. For them, the feast is not leisure, it is diplomacy. If Pharaoh smiles, their king is safe. If Pharaoh frowns, war brews, and you know it. You keep your gestures deliberate, your eyes sharp, your tone measured, because even a spilled cup can be interpreted as insult. The food keeps coming, bowls of honey, figs so ripe they collapse in syrup, pomegranates bursting with seeds. Beer thick as porridge, wine sweetened with dates, cakes fried in oil, their edges sticky with honey. Dishes meant to overwhelm not only appetite, but imagination. Guests stagger under abundance. Servants scrape leftovers into baskets for temple offerings, for servants' families, for dogs prowling the courtyard. Nothing is wasted, everything is recycled into order. As night deepens, the music swells. Harps shimmer, flutes wail, dancers whirl faster, braids flying, anklets jingling. Incense thickens, clouds of frankincense and myrrh blurring the air until the whole feels half real, half divine. You drink, yes, but you drink as Ra drinks, deliberately, measured, always aware that tomorrow the scribes will still write your name in glowing ink. You eat, yes, but you eat as Osiris eats, surrounded by abundance, but never overwhelmed. And as laughter grows louder, as envoys loosen tongues, as courtiers giggle, you remain a pivot. Your smile is slower, your movements deliberate, your body never slouched. Pharaoh does not slouch. Pharaoh does not spill. Pharaoh drinks eternity, not beer. Pharaoh eats order, not beef. Would you enjoy it? Perhaps for a moment, the taste of honeyed goose on your tongue, the swell of harps in your ears, the perfume of dancers brushing close. But enjoyment fades quickly, replaced by fatigue. The feast is performance, one more ritual, one more exhausting repetition of divinity. You would want to laugh too loudly, to drink too much, to collapse into cushions. You cannot. You are watched. You are always watched. And so the feast, like the court, like the temple, becomes another stage. Pharaoh does not live. Pharaoh performs. Even pleasure is duty. Even intoxication is balance. Even abundance is order. You imagine the Pharaoh's family as a private comfort, a place to retreat after the suffocating demands of temple and court. But you are wrong, because the family of a king is not family at all. It is another machine, another ritual, another performance of order. Queens are not just wives, they are symbols. Children are not just children, they are dynasties waiting, pawns already carved before they can walk. You think of love, of intimacy, of softness. Pharaoh's household has little of that. It has hierarchy, politics, fertility measured like grain, and eyes, always eyes, watching to see whether the women of the palace are fertile enough, whether the children are healthy enough, whether the king is producing enough heirs to guarantee Egypt's eternity. At the center sits the great royal wife, not necessarily the first you married, but the one chosen to embody queenship. Her titles are long and gilded. She who sees Horus and Seth, mistress of Upper and Lower Egypt, great one of the palace. She is painted in reliefs beside you, sometimes of equal size, which is not a casual artistic choice. Size is power, and her equal stature means she embodies Mayat at your side. She oversees rituals, she pours libations, she wears crowns almost as heavy as yours. To the people, she is Hathor incarnate, goddess of fertility and music, mother of Egypt. To you she is partner, but also rival, because her role is as political as yours. If she bears a son, her influence swells. If she does not, priests whisper, officials maneuver, concubines circle like hawks. And concubines there are, dozens, sometimes hundreds, depending on dynasty and palace wealth. Foreign princesses sent as diplomatic gifts, noble women of Egypt offered by their families, sometimes common women elevated by favor. Each is a chess piece in alliances. A Mitanni princess arrives with golden horses, a Hittite bride with promises of peace, a Nubian consort with ivory and archers. To marry one is to sign a treaty. To ignore one is to risk war. They are housed in the harem, the Perkenret, a vast complex within the palace walls, with gardens, pools, weaving rooms, music halls. It sounds like luxury, but it is prison gilded with perfume. The women live in comfort, but not freedom. Guarded, watched, controlled, their lives reduced to embroidery, song, and the faint hope that the king might notice them long enough to elevate their child into significance. And children, always children. Sons are weighed like treasure, daughters married off like coin. The moment they are born, scribes record omens. Was the sky clear? Did a falcon fly overhead? Did the Nile rise or fall? If the signs are good, priests declare the infant blessed. If not, whispers begin. You as pharaoh are judged not only on temples built and battles won, but on how many strong sons walk behind you during festivals. The people need to see continuity. They need to see Egypt stretching forward through your bloodline. A barren pharaoh is a failed pharaoh, no matter how much stone he piles into pyramids. Inside the palace, politics is endless. The great wife maneuvers to place her son in line. Concubines scheme. Eunuchs carry whispers from chamber to chamber. Priests ally with one branch of the family, generals with another. You cannot relax. Even in your bedchamber, your legacy is being calculated, alliances formed. A smile at the wrong wife becomes rumour. A neglected child becomes grievance. Your family is not your family. It is your battlefield. But the women are not powerless. Some carve their names into history. Hatshepsut ruled as king in her own right. Nefertiti stood beside Akhenaten, her beauty not mere ornament, but political tool, her statues towering almost as tall as his. Ti, wife of Amenhotep III, corresponded with foreign rulers, her words carrying the weight of treaties. The queen can be Hathor, motherly and fertile, but she can also be Sekhmet, lioness and deadly, her claws hidden in silk. You are pharaoh, but never assume you are the only one pulling strings in your palace. And what of love? Did pharaoh love? Perhaps. Reliefs show you holding hands with your queen, kissing your children, playing with daughters in gardens. But love here is never private. Every embrace is political. Every kiss is carved into stone to remind Egypt that the divine household is intact, that harmony reigns. You may love, but you cannot show love freely. Even tenderness is performance. Imagine yourself walking through your palace gardens. Lotus blooms float on ponds, incense drifts from braziers, musicians pluck harps. Around you, wives stroll, children run, laughter echoes. It looks like paradise. But every gaze is calculating, every smile is weighed. Your eldest son glances at you with ambition, your queen watches you with expectation, concubines glance with hope or envy. You are never husband, never father. You are always pharaoh. Would you survive such a family? Unlikely. You would crave intimacy, privacy, the comfort of uncalculated affection. You would want a wife who was only wife, children who were only children. But pharaoh cannot have that. Pharaoh's family is dynasty, theatre, politics disguised as love. And even in your most private chambers, the gods and the people demand a show. You may think that being pharaoh means commanding armies and presiding over rituals, but ask any peasant centuries later what remains of your reign, and they will not speak of the harvests you managed or the treaties you signed. They will point at stone. They will point at pyramids gleaming in the desert, temples sprawling like miniature cities, obelisks stabbing the sky. Pharaoh is not only king, not only high priest. Pharaoh is builder, mason-in-chief, the man whose face is chiseled into cliffs, whose name is cut into granite so deep that time itself hesitates to erase it. To rule Egypt is to rule in stone, because stone lasts longer than flesh. The building never ends. Even before your coronation, plans are drawn for your tomb. It is not morbid, it is practical. Eternity does not wait until death. It must be prepared daily. Architects whisper of chambers hidden deep in cliffs, walls covered in spells, ceilings painted with stars. You may still be breathing, but men are already tunneling through rock to house your eternal form. You eat breakfast, a quarryman splits limestone in your name. You listen to petitions. Workers haul granite blocks up river on sledges, pouring water on sand to make it slick, chanting hymns to keep rhythm. You drink wine at feasts. Engineers calculate angles for shafts that will align your resting place with Orion's belt. Your life and your death are simultaneous projects, one feeding the other, stone rising while flesh declines. But tombs are only part of it. Temples consume as much energy as pyramids. Each god demands a house, and you are their landlord. Karnak grows like a living organism, pylons taller than fortresses, hyper-style halls with forests of columns, each surface carved with your victories, your offerings, your face multiplied into eternity. Luxor gleams downriver, linked to Karnak by processional way, so that during Opet festival statues of Amun can travel while crowds chant and musicians play. Abydos is rebuilt, Memphis expanded, Heliopolis honored. Each temple is not only for the gods, but for you, because every relief proclaims, Pharaoh gave, Pharaoh built, Pharaoh sustained order. If your name is carved deep, you live forever. If it is erased, you die twice. Obelisks are your exclamation points, monoliths of granite, quarried at Aswan, dragged for miles, polished until they blind in the sun. They are dedicated to Ra, the sun god, their tips gilded to catch dawn's first light. But everyone knows whose name is carved down their sides. Each obelisk is a statement. I, Pharaoh, have raised the sun into stone. To stand beside one is to feel small. To command one raised is to remind Egypt that no weight is too heavy when Pharaoh's will orders it. The workforce is immense, tens of thousands. Quarrymen with copper chisels, haulers dragging sledges, carpenters shaping scaffolding, boatmen ferrying blocks, scribes recording rations, priests blessing foundations. They are not slaves in chains. Not always. Many are conscripted peasants drafted during the inundation when fields are underwater and farming is impossible. They are fed, housed in workers' villages, promised beer and bread. They sing chants as they pull ropes, their voices echoing against cliffs. To them it is labor, backbreaking, endless. To you, it is immortality, carved block by block, loaf by loaf. And the process is ritualized. Foundations cannot be laid until priests purify the ground, sprinkle netron, recite hymns. The first block cannot be set until you strike it with a ceremonial adze, even if afterward thousands of others do the real work. Walls cannot be decorated until scribes draft every figure in red ink, corrected by master artists in black, then carved by chisels, then painted by laborers. You do not see the sweat, but you see the result. Walls that glow with scenes of you smiting enemies, offering incense, embraced by gods. The illusion is complete. Pharaoh does everything. The reality is that Pharaoh commands everything. And it never stops. You finish one temple, another begins. You add pylons, expand courtyards, raise obelisks, dig tombs. You measure your reign in stone. To live without building is unthinkable. To rule without carving your name into cliffs is to vanish. Even failure is judged in masonry. A collapsed wall means divine displeasure. An unfinished tomb means chaos. You cannot rest. Egypt demands stone, and stone demands you. Would you survive this? Not as Pharaoh. The weight of it would crush you. You would want to leave quarries to masons, temples to priests, tombs to undertakers. But Egypt will not let you. Pharaoh is eternal mason, and eternity does not pause. You might think the story of a pharaoh ends with glory carved in stone, pyramids gleaming in the desert, temples echoing with hymns, reliefs forever showing you triumphant. But Egypt insists on a final act, and it is not one you can refuse. To be pharaoh means to confront enemies, endure the weight of age, submit to death, and live again through ritual. It is not a life that stops. It is a cycle that demands your body even after your breath has left it. Your borders never stop bleeding. To the south, Nubian archers bend their bows, at once feared and desired, their gold coveted, their loyalty never certain. To the west, Libyans drift in feathers and leather, raiding oases like sandstorms. To the east, Asiatics arrive with gifts in one hand and chariots in the other, treaties written in clay and broken as quickly as they are pressed. You cannot ignore them, so you host their embassies. Foreigners bow low, offering ivory, incense, gold, horses, daughters. They call you brother, but you know brotherhood lasts only as long as both of you are too tired to fight. And when words fail, you mount the chariot again. Even when your bones ache, you must be seen drawing the bow, smiting 100 enemies in a single gesture carved forever on walls. Whether you truly shot or not does not matter. The reliefs will say you did, and Egypt will believe stone before it believes memory. But even stone cannot hide what age does to you. The same said festival you once ran with vigor becomes humiliation. Your knees protest with every lap, your lungs heave as priests chant for your renewal. Whispers spread. Is the king weakening? Is Mayat in danger? The palace grows restless, wives maneuver, concubines scheme, priests calculate who will inherit your favor, generals wonder who will lead when you no longer can. You still sit on the throne, but the weight of crowns grows heavier. You still pour libations, but your hand trembles. And when you cough, scribes record it as omen. A pharaoh is eternal in theory, but in practice, pharaoh is flesh, and flesh always betrays itself. Eventually, the machine takes what it has been waiting for. Death does not come with the clash of enemy chariots, but with incense smoke in your chamber, wives wailing, priests chanting. Your last breath rattles and fades, and for a moment there is silence. Then the cycle resumes. Embalmers claim you, wash you, anoint you with oils, pack your body with natron, remove your organs and place them into jars guarded by falcons, jackals, baboons, men. They wrap you in linen, layer upon layer, sliding amulets between folds, scarabs to shield, ankhs to breathe, eyes of Horus to heal. But your face is given a golden mask, not for vanity, but because gold does not rot, and Pharaoh must not rot. 70 days of preparation, then the procession, priests chanting, soldiers marching, women scattering incense. You are lowered into granite, your sarcophagus painted with stars inside its lid, your walls covered with spells to help you navigate the night sky, your floor painted as earth, your ceiling as heavens. Food, beer, weapons, chariots, even dolls in the form of servants are placed beside you, ready to come alive when summoned. Your tomb is sealed, and you are gone, from flesh, but not from Egypt. Because Pharaoh does not die, Pharaoh becomes cult. Priests keep your memory alive, burning incense in mortuary temples, offering loaves and beer to your car. Scribes carve hymns of your greatness. Crowds see your statues, still receiving offerings long after your breath has stopped. You are fed in eternity as long as your name is spoken. But if enemies erase your cartouche, if your name is hacked out of stone, then you suffer the only true death. Oblivion. This is why building mattered more than battles, why obelisks rose higher than armies marched. Flesh ends, but stone resists. You live as long as walls stand, as long as glyphs are carved deep enough that time hesitates to erase them. Would you survive it? To be pharaoh is to be many things at once. Warrior, priest, judge, builder, father, god, corpse. It is to live not for yourself, but for Egypt. For Mayat, for eternity. You might crave freedom, but freedom does not exist here. You might hope for peace, but peace is only the pause between festivals. You are crook and flail, crown and cartouche, wrapped in linen, sealed in stone, prayed to as if you are still awake. And in the end, when your mask gleams in torchlight, when your tomb is sealed, you become what you always were. A performance. A pharaoh alive is a hinge between gods and men. A pharaoh dead is a monument. And the wheel turns again, waiting for your son, your heir, your successor, to rise at dawn and repeat everything you repeated. That is kingship in Egypt. Not joy, not choice, not leisure. Endurance, ritual. Eternity carved in stone, endured in flesh, and sustained in memory.